Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. William stopped in front of the office. He took in more air and knocked on the door. Yes, he heard the energetic voice of the agency director. When he heard the invitation, he turned the doorknob and stepped confidently inside. The office turned out to be a large and bright room. Behind a huge, massive desk sat the director himself. He was a solid man in his 50s, with a kind smile. As soon as William saw the owner, he immediately realized that this was an intelligent and businesslike man who knew how to do business and loved money. That's why he was relieved in his heart. He would surely be able to make a deal with him. William came over, sat down on the table, and smiled broadly and said, "Good afternoon, Frank. My name is William, and I am here on very important business." The director's name. He read the plaque that hung on the office door. When William read the surname of the director of the Holiday Organization Agency, he involuntarily smiled. Did Frank sit down? He thought it was funny. But now, the fate of the boy depended on this man. And so William did not delay and got straight to the point. "I have a rather delicate question for you. You see, other agencies have turned me down. I'm relying on you. It's a matter of life and death. My fate is now in your hands. Frank, here's the thing." But before William could finish his sentence, he exclaimed cheerfully, "Don't even dream about it." William stopped talking in surprise and stared at the man. "Don't look at me like that. I know exactly what will happen next. Not the first year in this chair." And my answer: "No, sweetheart. My girls are not going to the bachelor party. Are you out of your mind to come to me? To the best children's party planner in the business? You're in the wrong place with an offer like that. We only do parties for little kids. No, of course, we can also congratulate an adult, but as an exception, and all within the bounds of decency," said Veselov. "Is everything clear to you?" Yes, I had no such thoughts, was surprised by the reaction from the cheerful William. "I just want to. We don't rent costumes either." Frank interrupted him again. "Again, we've had a bad experience. The only time I made concessions, there was one sitting here in front of me begging me tearfully. And what did I do? Pity the man. I have a kind soul, and people take advantage of that. I finally got my suit back. And what do you think?" That William translated, not realizing what the story had to do with him. And that was it. The man waved his hands. They returned the costume of Little Red Riding Hood with a hole in the most delicate place. Can you imagine? He blushed with annoyance. And the girls then perform, so that he their costumes in front of children. So no. "Young man, goodbye. I can't help you." And the man pretended to study very important documents. "Frank, wait a minute, you William. You were outraged, at least hear me out. I have urgent business, for which I will pay well. By the way," he looked seriously at once cheerful, "but please do not interrupt me. Outline." The man was interested. "I am ready to listen to you carefully. Here's the thing." Slightly embarrassed, spoke William. "I need a girl, an actress without a costume. Well, that's out of the question." Did he roar? And his eyes widened with indignation. They looked like they were about to pop out of their orbits. "Do you realize where you're going with a request like that? We only employ decent girls. They have families, husbands, children. This isn't a brothel, after all. What do you mean you need an actress without a costume?" Was Siva so angry that he even started stuttering? "Yes, calm down, Frank," William shouted. "You've got it all wrong again. Let me finish. I don't want a naked girl. But she doesn't have to be in a balloon or violin costume. Yeah, we don't have costumes like that, mistress. Did you sit in your nose? What kind of violin staples? But you understand violin suits, and fine, I don't want any. I want your actress to play the part of my fiancé." William was finally able to state his request. "I don't understand. Why? What happened to your fiancé?" You could see that since the jolly one was really curious. "Nothing. I don't have one at all. You know, my parents are really worried about it. And to calm them down, I told them that I have a fiancée, that I've been with her for a long time. And we're getting married. How was I supposed to know they'd want to come meet her? And in 2 days, they'll be here. And that I'd tell them there's no fiancé. That I lied. That's why I want to rent a girl. William said, and realized how absurd it all sounded. Well, maybe you could ask some girls you know. Maybe someone from work. The director asked sympathetically. I can't. I don't have any women I know. Yes, did the strength. Oh, this modern youth, but still cannot help you. There's no bride for hire service in the press. And the time is New Year's Eve holidays, matinees. All the girls are busy. We don't have any free ones, as they say. You know Christmas. Well, please, Frank, think about it. I'm prepared to pay very well, really very well. Trying to persuade the cheerful William, a flame of greed lit up in the headmaster's eyes, but quickly faded, and he said in a firm, non-accepting tone, I wish I could help you, but I can't. I'm sorry, and good day to you. Of course, from the cheerful Frank was very fond of money and would be only too glad to earn some, especially on Christmas Eve. But he was afraid that this young man might be bribed by competitors who wanted to ruin the reputation of his fine agency. Frank glanced again at the visitor, who continued to sit back in his chair, and begged to look at him some more. And I repeat, I say again, there is nothing I can do to help you. Goodbye. William sighed and walked out of the office, immersed in his thoughts for 2 days, and his parents would be in his apartment eagerly awaiting to meet his fiancée. But he didn't have a fiancée or even a girl he knew. He was walking down the corridor and thinking how to find a way out of this difficult situation. Suddenly, the door opened abruptly in one of the offices. If William did not dodge, it would definitely crack him on the forehead. And a pretty miniature girl flew out of the room. She was in such a hurry, it turned out she couldn't see anyone in front of her. The young man said grudgingly, Actually, it is possible and more attentive. The girl took the phone away from her ear and whispered, for God's sake, sorry, and then returned to the conversation. How can it? You're a cab, which means you don't have any cars available. Let me pay double the price. I need to leave urgently. Do you understand or not? It's very urgent, very urgent. No, I can't wait half an hour. She listened and looked at the phone for a few more seconds and said angrily, What am I supposed to do if you don't have cars? What kind of day is this? Everything is upside down. After all, I was standing next to him the whole time listening to the conversation. Suddenly, he suggested, Let me give you a ride. It's a long way. And the guy did not have time to finish the sentence because the stranger grabbed him by the arm and dragged him to the exit of the building. God sent you to me. Please, young man, just take me. I'll pay you. It's very urgent. William didn't even resist. Only on the porch, said the girl. Wait, first of all, let go of my hand. I need to get my keys. And secondly, where do you have far to go? Not at all to me. There's a kindergarten 2 steps away from the bus stop, you know. That's where I'm going. William was surprised. The stranger seemed too young to have children. Maybe a nephew. Why do you need a kindergarten? Asked the boy. She looked at him with a surprised look, but answered, My son called from the kindergarten. Liam has done something wrong again. I have to run, sort it out. About the territory. My name is Kathy, by the way, the girl said suddenly. I'm William. Nice to meet you. Without taking his eyes off the road, the boy said, Oh, William, here's the garden brake. Kathy shouted so loudly and so unexpectedly that William braked sharply. Kathy, what are you doing? We could have had an accident. He shook his head. Sorry, it's nerves, the girl said. Every day there are some problems, you know. What about your husband? Doesn't he help you at all? But I don't have a husband. Kathy took a deep breath and got out of the car. Thank you. You've been a great help. How much do I owe you? Oh, it's nothing. Nothing. William hesitated half a word when he saw that his passenger was already running towards the kindergarten door. So of course, she couldn't hear him. The guy was surprised at how nimbly she ran in her high heels, paling him on the sidewalk, jogging passersby. William had already started the cars, was about to move off, as suddenly the phone rang, called from work. So the man long and hard explained to his colleague where to find the necessary documents. And then he also took the same amount of time to find out why these papers were needed at all. In the course of the conversation, it became clear that it was not these documents that were needed, but others, and they were in the office of the manager. Finally, William finished the conversation and, throwing the phone on the passenger seat, wanted to move, but this time he noticed Kathy. She was holding the hand of a boy who was struggling to walk. The guy didn't realize how he opened the door and shouted to Kathy, "Come on, hurry up, I'll let you down." The girl began to look around, not realizing what was calling her. But noticing William, she smiled and led her son to the car with a quick step. "You're still here. I thought you had already left," the girl said, surprised. "No, I didn't have time. I was on the phone for a long time. And then I saw you coming back." The guy smiled, trying to see the boy in the rearview mirror. There was something about the kid's face, so William couldn't help but wonder, what's wrong with the kid's face? "He's just a little dreamer," he said of Kathy with a strange intonation. "What do you mean?" I asked in surprise, you see. And only now I saw the boy's face. It was streaked with green. Not all of it, though. Only his cheeks, chin, and forehead were covered with a hat. But from under it, a few more stripes of the same color could be seen. "Well, handsome," said William, barely restraining a smile. But when he saw Kathy's displeased look, he tried to be serious again. "So what happened?" he asked. The girl only opened her mouth to answer her, interrupted by the little boy. "Uncle, do you really like it? I don't pronounce it a little." Words, mumbled the boy. It was obvious that he wanted to say something else, but his mother looked at him so sternly that Liam immediately changed his mind. "And what happened was that Liam found the markers with displeasure," said Kathy with the word educator. She was distracted for a minute, and in the minute he managed to color himself. But that's half the trouble. And here's what the parents of the two girls who were also waved all over their faces with markers have to say. I'm even afraid to imagine where he found them. William wondered. The girl sighed and said, "I don't know. I only know that the markers are alcoholic and it will be quite difficult to wash it all off. And it's on the eve of a matinee. Snowflakes with battle green coloring," said Kathy, and involuntarily smiled Liam. Seeing that the mother picked up and smiling, hugged her neck and said, "You do not worry, they will be the most beautiful. It's a costume, Christmas trees. Look at me." And he pulled away from his mother so she could get a better look at his creation. "See, the green ones are the branches of the Christmas tree. And the toys Jenna didn't have time to draw me, and I drew them all flowers and balls. You know, it's beautiful." Kathy, looking at his son, only covered his mouth with his hand and slowly shook his head from side to side. William, driving the car, was laughing because he couldn't hold back any longer. "We'll talk to you at home," Kathy said, and looked at her son sternly. "Kathy, tell me the exact address." The girl named the street and the houses. The man exclaimed, "Yes, we are almost neighbors. I live 2 houses down. And you know what the most amazing thing is?" He looked at the girl in the rearview mirror and, meeting her questioning gaze, continued, "I've never met you before." She was about to reply, but her phone rang. "Yes, David." "No, I'm sorry. It slipped my mind. Can I do it tomorrow?" "But David, I got it. I'll be there soon." Kathy replied bitterly and disconnected the phone. She turned to the boy and said, "Liam, I'm taking you to Aunt Maria's. You can stay with her until tonight." "But I don't want to go to her." The child began to whimper. "Liam, I have no one else to leave you with. I have to go to work," she said. "Who is Aunt Maria?" William asked. For some reason, he liked the son and his mother very much. They were somehow real and alive, and that attracted him. "This is our neighbor," the girl quickly explained. "I leave my son with her when I have to go to work. In return, I help her, bringing her groceries, cleaning, cooking." Clearly mumbled the guy. "And you have no relatives?" "No," Kathy answered sharply, and William realized that she was not comfortable talking about it. "I'm sorry if I offended you. I didn't mean to," calmly and quietly said the young man. "It's all right." Kathy also tried to make her voice more friendly. "Okay, William, our entrance is next. Thank you so much. You just saved me today," said the girl, turned to her son and commanded Liam, "Come on. Come out quickly. I'm already late. Can I give you a ride to work?" Suddenly, William asked, without expecting it of himself. "I wouldn't mind," Kathy wondered. "Don't you have anything to do?" But it turns out that it all smiled the guy. "So I'm waiting for you." "Yes, of course," she said. She took her son by the hand and with a quick step walked towards the entrance. The boy was funny, sitting next to him and barely keeping up with his mother. William looked after the couple and smiled involuntarily. 15 minutes later, Kathy opened the front door and got into the car. "Shall we go? Unless, of course, you've changed your mind." No, of course we're going fast," William said. "Back to where we met you." She remained silent and just nodded, leaning back in her chair and covering her eyes. But William couldn't drive in silence. He wanted to find out as much as he could about Kathy. So he asked, "What do you do for a living?" She hesitated for a moment. The question stumped her, but she soon answered. "To be honest, it is difficult for me to answer this question unequivocally. Actually, I'm an accountant at David's firm. But that's officially. And unofficially, I am a secretary and cleaner and sometimes even an animator," she said and sighed sadly. "How is it an animator?" surprised William. "I think you came out of the office of the cheerful director of the holiday agency. So my boss, David and Frank, childhood friends," explained. Kathy was silent for a while and then continued. "Sometimes when the fun one has a problem with the animators, my boss kind of rents me out. So here I am entertaining the kids in different costumes." She was quiet again for a minute. "What did you do of the fun stuff? Did you want to book a party?" "To be honest, I don't recommend using his services. His girls don't drink much. He skips out. And they might steal something." "No, we didn't have a deal. I had a rather delicate request for him," the guy said. "What was it? If it's no secret." "Of course." Kathy looked at William in surprise and added, as if apologizing for her curiosity, "Don't get me wrong. It's just that, knowing the man's level of greed, I'm very curious what you offered him that even the cheapskate refused." She laughed. "It's just that we all know that if you're fun for money, you'll do anything. You see, I wanted to rent a bride." William tried to answer as casually as possible, but in his opinion, he failed. "I mean a rented bride." "Why?" Kathy didn't even try to hide her amazement. "It's simple. My parents think I have a fiancé. They're coming over in 2 days to meet her, but I don't really have one." "Well, then tell me you don't have a fiancé. Why complicate things?" the girl asked. William thought for a moment. He didn't understand how to explain to his new acquaintance that his parents loved him very much and were incredibly worried that he was still alone. "The thing is that if my mom finds out that I don't have a fiancé, she will start matchmaking the daughter of her best friend again. But this girl is not my type." William took a deep breath and remembered Natasha, whom his mother tried to match him up with every chance she got. How messed up is that? Kathy stretched, trying to hold back a laugh. The new acquaintance seemed to her a serious, determined, and courageous man. Therefore, this situation seemed to her funny and even somewhat childish. How he is such a strong man cannot explain to his mother that he is not ready to start a family. Kathy, "Well, really, nothing funny," said William, and a little resentfully. "You just don't know my mom." "Well, yes," said Kathy. "By the way, did you offer out of funny money?" Is he grasping for every dime? Yes, of course, replied William, and briefly recounted Kathy's conversation with the agency director. Okay, Kathy thought for a moment. And tell me, please, what will your fiancé have to do? Your mother will not check how serious your relationship is, will she? Well, that is, the meeting will be without intimacy, right? Asked the girl, trying not to laugh. Well, of course not. Not even a sleepover. Mom thinks that Helen and I do not live together yet. With who? Helen. Excuse me, Kathy. Yeah, that's the name of my fictional fiancé, according to legend. Got it, she said, and then she paused and said, Listen, leave your phone number. You helped me out today, so I'll try not to be indebted either. I'll try to talk to my friend, but no promises. I'll call you later. Tonight's the night. Kathy, I'll be very grateful to you. You're so helpful. William was glad because he didn't believe that his question would be solved somehow. He dictated his number. Kathy wrote it down and hurriedly left the car and ran towards the building. William decided to go shopping and buy gifts for his parents. A few hours later, Kathy literally persuaded her friend to help her new acquaintance to live. I'll do it. Come on, don't you need money? Moreover, the guy is cool, calm, and a great car. Kathy, if he's such a great guy, why don't you go yourself? You'll play the part of the bride, and you'll make money. I think you and Bones could really use it. No, what did you say to Kathy? She actually really wanted to play the part of William's fiancé, although I didn't understand why. But she was scared, probably because she really liked the guy. So why not? My friend wouldn't let it go. I can't have a life, especially with no one to leave Liam with. Kathy was lying. Imagine, if I come to the meeting with a child, William's parents will definitely not be happy that their future brides already have a son. Why don't you go? You're pretty, he's cute. Maybe it'll work out. Kathy, no, I can't. We just made up with Ben yesterday. Kathy sighed. She knew Nancy loved her boyfriend, but they were always fighting and making up. And if they were in a reconciliation period now, it would be impossible to talk her friend into it. She gave up. Okay. Sorry, of course, Kathy said quickly, hearing the menacing expression in the receiver. I'm really glad you two made up. I just wanted to help that guy so badly. I thought you'd agree. Well, what's the problem? Help him yourself. Nancy, I almost yelled at you, but I said I can't. Kathy, think of a better excuse to convince Kostya to the neighbor and run to your William, Nancy said sternly. Well, first of all, he's not mine. And secondly, Maria can't sit with Liam. She's busy. Kathy was blatantly lying. I wonder what sort of urgent business that old woman might have. I've never hated a friend's roommate in my life. So she said those words with a little bit of anger. Nancy, how should I know? She doesn't report to me. She said she couldn't. So if she can't, Kathy cut her off. And when you say you need a bride, then play in 2 days. Nancy spoke quickly. Look, you're lucky. We've got Ben's day off, and we'll take him to our place, especially since Liam loves my Ben, and the boy needs to socialize with men. That sentence almost brought Kathy to tears. Lately, she often heard that her son just needs male company. But where could she get that companionship? Kathy didn't know. Liam's father had never seen him. The girl dated him for a short time. It was her first true love. But it turned out that the man was just on a business trip and soon left town. When Kathy found out that she was pregnant, she tried to find him, but she could not. True, Nancy then found his page in the social network, but it turned out he had a girlfriend. He'd been in a relationship for a long time. And with Kathy, he was just having a brief affair. She decided to forget about this man, but Nancy persuaded to write to him and tell him about her pregnancy. The girl decided to, but he did not respond immediately, nor after a day, nor after a month. Kathy understood everything and did not bother him anymore, deciding to raise her son alone. Of course, the doctor and her friend asked her opinion about the turnover, but the girl firmly decided that she would give birth. Then Nancy said, "You know, I was sure you wouldn't have an abortion. But I had to ask you. Don't worry, I'll help you. You're the closest thing I have to a friend." She added in a quiet voice. Kathy and Nancy had been best friends since kindergarten, always visiting each other. Then they went to school and the girls' lives began to go through a rough patch. First, Nancy's dad was found in an alley with his head bashed in. But it was not like a banal robbery, because the money, wedding ring, and a nice watch were in place. The investigator had many versions of what had happened, but Nancy's mom didn't believe in any of them. She was so distraught with grief that she lost track of time and fell out of reality. The woman completely stopped paying attention to her daughter, and Kathy's parents felt very sorry for the girl. "Kathy, if Nancy wants to spend the night with us," said Molly, Kathy's mom, "just tell her to tell Mommy." "Mommy, are you the best?" Kathy exclaimed, hugging her mom. When Kathy told her wife that she could spend the night, she was very happy. She could no longer stay with her mom all the time, who was starting to turn to the bottle more and more often. She would get drunk and start blaming everyone for her husband's death. And worst of all, she threw nasty things at Nancy. "It would be better if Father were alive, and you were gone in tears," her mother shouted to her. "Mother, what are you talking about?" Nancy tried to contradict her somehow, but she quickly interrupted her and kept shouting at her, throwing more and more accusations. Nancy loved her mom and felt sorry for her. She missed her cheerful father and their close-knit, happy family. She didn't want to believe that the old life was over. Nancy was having a hard time coping with the loss of her dad from her mother. There was no support. So Kathy's parents' suggestion actually saved her. Thanks to Kathy and us parents, Nancy was able to move on with her life. But she always waited for her beloved kind mother to be the same as before. It made her run home every day after school to check on her mother and tell her about herself. But every day her mother's condition was getting worse. She was sinking lower and lower. She was not interested in what was going on in her daughter's life. So the girl's heart was torn to pieces. Despite this, Nancy studied well, did well in school, and was just a great good girl. At the same time, everyone at school knew that her mom was constantly drinking, and she herself lived with her parents, a friend. But nobody interfered in her life. Kathy. Her parents dressed her, bought everything she needed, and even gave her money for school needs. Nancy realized that without them, she would definitely end up in an orphanage. She was grateful for their support and care. In fact, strangers to her people. Therefore, the girl tried to please them in any way possible. She always helped her wife around the house, cooked, cleaned, and did everything they asked her to do. "Nancy, you must be tired. Come on, go and have a rest," Molly used to tell her, but she only told her aunt. "Natasha, it's not difficult for me. I'm only happy to help you," and she said it very sincerely. She wanted to thank her saviors, but she couldn't do it any other way. When the girls were 13 years old, Kathy's father died. He was a young man of 42 years old who just didn't wake up one morning. There had been a cardiac arrest. At this point, Nancy was terribly worried about Kathy's mom. She had already seen the woman break down and sink after her husband's death. She was terrified that Molly wouldn't make it either. But Natalia didn't break down, but instead pulled herself together and kept her composure. At her husband's funeral, Molly didn't cry, but she only feigned calmness so as not to scare the girls and show them all the despair and pain. Then she withdrew from Kathy and Nancy and began to disappear to work all the time. Nancy took over all the housework. She cooked, did laundry, checked. The girl had almost stopped visiting her own mother because she had hit rock bottom and turned the apartment into a brothel where there were constantly many strangers to Nancy. Kathy had a hard time accepting her father's death. She withdrew into herself. She cried a lot and read a lot. Of course, she loved books before, but now they became her constant companions. Books helped the girl to detach herself from everything and be transported to a fairy tale world where there is no resentment and pain. She lived other people's lives together with the heroes of the novels to forget about her loss. Those around her could not understand how such completely different girls could be friends. Kathy was a romantic, completely unadjusted to life. And Nancy was a simple girl who, for her 13 years, managed to face a lot of problems and successfully overcome them. But fate is a strange thing, and she tied them with a strong thread for many years. But the girls' lives continued. They finished the 9th grade. Nancy went to study to be a hairdresser, and Kathy wanted to study until the last grade and go to university. But still, she decided to go to the vocational school that her friend only to become an accountant. After all, in her class she had only Nancy, and Kathy did not communicate with anyone else. When the girls entered the school, Nancy quickly made friends. She was cheerful and everyone liked her. Kathy, on the other hand, could not find a common language with her classmates. "Kathy, why did such a handsome guy wanted to meet you today?" Nancy stretched out, lying in her bed at Kathy's house. Yes, but she was already embarrassed. "Kathy, I told you I don't want to date just anyone. I want to fall in love once and for all, like in romance novels." She rolled her eyes dreamily. Nancy understood her friend and accepted her for who she was. She loved Kathy very much and was grateful to have this person in her life. The girls started working part-time jobs early on. They were promoters, picked fruits and vegetables in stores, and went to the fields to pick strawberries or dill. During this time, Kathy's mother had little interest in the girls' lives, but she kept them fully provided for. It wasn't uncommon for Molly to come home late at night or go out on weekends. "Kathy, I used to ask Mom where she was all the time. She said she was working hard." The girl trusted her because she was sure her mother didn't drink. She never smelled of alcohol. But the girl noticed some oddities in the woman. For example, she began to dress differently. One day, Kathy met a neighbor who asked, "Kathy, Mom's not sick?" "No. Why would you think that?" The girl was very surprised and a little frightened. "It's just that I saw her with some people who were all in white, and I thought she was with the doctors," the neighbor answered. And after thinking about it, she added, "Okay, she's not sick, and that's good." Kathy was excited about talking to the neighbor, so she quickly went home. The girl wanted to talk to her mother, but she was not home. In the evening, she told her friend about her worry. "Kathy, be sure to talk to your mother," Nancy said worriedly. "Strange people in white outfits." The girl agreed. She, too, didn't understand who these people in white the neighbor was talking about could be. That same evening, when Molly came home, the daughter started a conversation with her mother. But as soon as she heard about the people in white coats, she immediately became nervous and told her daughter that it was none of her business. "You know I've been pulling you and your friend alone for years. Tell me, do I ask you questions?" "No, you stay out of my business. It's my life, you understand," Mom almost yelled at Kathy. Then she grabbed her jacket and ran out the door. "Mom, where are you going?" Kathy tried to catch up with her mother, but when she ran out into the street, she was already out of sight. "Kathy, I went back to the apartment. On the doorstep was waiting for her upset Nancy." "Kathy, Molly's right. She's been keeping me for a long time, even though she shouldn't. I guess I'm a guest. Let me go tomorrow." "Where are you going?" Kathy was crying. "It's impossible to live at your place. Stay, it doesn't matter. I'll sort it out somehow." "Nancy, don't pay attention to what your mom says. I don't know what's gotten into her. She really loves you, and she's glad you're staying with us. Don't leave me, Nancy." Kathy cried harder than ever. "That's it. Just don't cry." Nancy put her arms around her friend and began to stroke her head. "I'm not leaving you. I'll talk to Mom tomorrow, and we'll work things out through the tears," the girl said. They talked most of the night and fell asleep only towards morning. They wondered what would happen in the future, dreamed, and in the morning they quickly left for college. The girls were not worried that Molly did not spend the night at home. It had happened very often lately. But when they came home from school, They sounded the alarm because Kathy's mom was still not home. "Nancy, is it just me, or did Mom never come?" Kathy stretched out. "Yes, I think she never came either." Nancy had already gone to the kitchen and noticed that nothing had changed there either. There were dishes in the sink from the morning. No one else had eaten, and the fridge was untouched. Kathy did not answer her friend. She quickly ran to her mother's room. The bed had been dispatched. All the things were in their places. The girl opened the closet doors and breathed a sigh of relief when she saw all the clothes hanging. She was afraid that her mom had left home, resentful of her. After that thought, Kathy had another thought in her head, and she quickly grabbed her phone. She dialed her mom's number, but it was disconnected. "Nancy, the phone is off." Kathy sank to the floor. "What if something happened? I'm really scared." "Well, calm down. It doesn't mean anything. The phone could just be dead." Nancy tried to speak as calmly as possible. "So, what are we gonna do? Where do you think she might be? We have to make sure she's okay." Kathy couldn't calm down, so she peppered her hand with questions. "Hey, do you have Molly's work number? Maybe check there." "Nancy, it's evening." Kathy objected. "What's the point of calling work?" "Well, look, you and I stopped by Molly's work. Remember when she forgot her phone?" Nancy tried to help her friend. "Now, remember, there was a guard booth on the first floor." Kathy nodded. "And if we can't get through to your mom's office, we'll call the booth there." "Agreed." Asked Nancy, "But I don't have the guard's cell phone. That way we can find him easily. Your mom has a notebook where she writes down all the phone numbers she needs. I think I saw her in the hallway," answered Nancy and quickly ran to find the notebook. "Come on, take the phone. Calling the office, and I'll find the number." Kathy took the phone, dialed her mother's number once more, but it was still unavailable. Then she dialed the phone number in Molly's office, but no one answered. This was not surprising since it was almost 10:00 p.m. "Well?" asked Nancy, who had just returned from the hallway. "Kathy answers me. Mom became the head. Let's call the guard. I found the number for the gatehouse. What am I going to tell them?" Nancy looked at her friend thoughtfully and smiled slightly. Kathy was like that, kind, reliable, smart, but completely unfit for life. "Okay, let me make the call myself." Nancy picked up her phone and started dialing the number of the walk-in from her notebook. After a couple seconds, she heard a stern male voice. "Hello." Nancy was startled by the man's gruff tone, but she quickly pulled herself together and said, "Good evening. This is the builder." "That's right. Is the office closed now? Will it open at 9:00 a.m.? The security guard said quickly and was about to hang up. But Nancy reacted quickly and shouted, "Wait a second. Hold on, please. 1 second. Don't hang up. What is it now?" "Well, my mom is your chief accountant. Started telling my wife. And today she did not come from work." The girl tried to explain everything to the guard as accurately and quickly as possible. "You know, I'm really worried. Can you tell me what time she left work and whether she was even in the office today?" The man hummed and said, "You know, girl, I can't give you such information. I'm not allowed to." "Man, well, please, I'm really worried." It was Nancy's mom who almost cried. The girl's excitement was transmitted to her friend, who clung to the phone. On the other side, "Well, all right. Speak the name, your mom's name, her position." The man on the other end of the wire took pity on the girl. "Molly is the chief accountant." As quickly and clearly as possible, said Nancy, and waited for an answer. A rustling of paper came to the girl. Apparently, the man was leafing through a magazine and repeating under his nose, "So, listen, friend," said the guard, switching with the girl on the first name. "Something you got mixed up. We don't have any working for us, and the chief accountant's name is different." "What's that?" The girl was surprised. "Check again. You've definitely had a good look." For some reason, the man was angered by her words, and he said angrily, "What do you want me to do? I actually wanted to help you, and you so stretched the guard." I think I realized you were sent by someone to play a prank on me. Or is Sebastian testing me? Come clean." Then the man started cursing and yelling loudly. Nancy was frightened and hung up the phone. The girls sat in silence and looked at each other. After a while, Nancy said, "The security guard said that Aunt Molly doesn't work at their company and the head accountant's name is something else entirely." "I heard that, Nancy," replied Kathy very quietly, "but I don't see how that can be. I mean, she was taking money from somewhere." Nancy only helped her head in reply. "Nancy, and so for Mom, I'm afraid," said Kathy in a whisper and wrapped her arms around her knees. "First of all, let's calm down." "What do you mean, let's calm down?" Kathy screamed. "Mommy hasn't been home in over 24 hours, and I have no idea where to find her." "Kathy, let's go to bed now. It's getting late. We'll go to the police in the morning if your mom doesn't come back." But suddenly, she has a fiancé. Here she is in his living room. Nancy tried to convince her friend. True, she herself didn't believe what she was saying, but she really wanted to support Kathy. What was life like for them? "Through tears?" asked the girl. "She would have told me, warned me." "Well, maybe she was afraid to tell you. After all, you loved your daddy so much if it was Molly and was afraid you wouldn't accept her new man." "Kathy, I began to calm down thanks to my friend's words." The girls got into bed and started discussing Kathy and Mom's disappearance. I fell asleep unnoticed. As soon as Kathy woke up, she immediately ran to her mom's room to see if she was back. But everything in the room was the same. The bed was still sent out as well. "Nancy, Mom is still not here. Let's go to the police," said a frustrated Kathy. Yes, of course we will. What else are we going to do?" Immediately, her friend replied. The girls started to pull their jackets on, but suddenly Kathy's phone rang. She took it out with shaking hands and saw that the screen said Mom. "It's Mom," Kathy said anxiously. "Well, answer it," Nancy said hurriedly. But she saw that her friend was in shock, so she quickly grabbed the phone and shouted into the receiver, "Molly, where are you?" "It's okay, Molly. The girl is not Molly." "Nancy, I heard an unfamiliar voice. My name is Miranda and I'm..." "Who are you? Where did you get your mom's phone from?" She grabbed my wife's phone and started yelling at her. "What's wrong with her? Where is she?" "Young lady, if you'll be quiet for a while and listen to me, I'll tell you everything." "Okay, I'm sorry." Kathy tried to calm down and control herself. "My name is Miranda. I'm a nurse at the regional hospital." Tears ran down Kathy's cheeks, but she continued to listen to the woman. "Yesterday a woman was brought to us unconscious and without papers, so we couldn't talk to her or identify her. We recently found a cell phone in her things and just now charged it to the phone. And I found a number that's signed as her daughter. So I'm calling you." "Yes, thank you very much," Kathy said quietly. "That with my mom, they'll let me in to see her now. You see, she's in serious condition. So I can't tell you whether you can see her or not, but you must come to the hospital. We'll expect you in an hour with your mother's documents." "Yes, of course," agreed the girl. "Well, she is in the hospital with her mother." And with Nancy sprinkled questions, as from the horn of plenty. "Yes, in the regional," answered Kathy, and recounted to her friend the whole conversation with the nurse. "Well, what are we standing here for? Get dressed. Let's go." "Nancy," I handed Kathy my jacket, but suddenly I realized and took off my shoes. "What are you doing? Where are you going?" Kathy asked me in surprise. "We didn't take the papers." The girl quickly found Molly's passport, medical card, policy, and other documents in the drawer. She knew exactly where the papers were. In the apartment there was a special drawer there with various documents. She kept her passport there as well. Upon reaching the hospital, Kathy dialed her mother's. The phone number was disconnected again. The girls did not know in which ward Molly was lying, so they had to spend a lot of time to find out. When they found out, it was too late. Kathy's mom had died without regaining consciousness. Upon hearing this news, the girl froze. She couldn't scream or cry. She just sat down and stared at one point. The wife did not understand how to support her friend, what to say to her, how to find the right words, and what could be said to give a person hope when he lost his closest and dearest soul. She just sat next to her friend and put her arm around her shoulders. A short time later, the girls learned that Kathy's mom had thrown herself in front of a truck in an attempt to commit suicide. The driver reacted quickly and managed to swerve to the side, but still hit Molly tangentially, and she flew into the guardrail. Then the truck driver called an ambulance and went with the victim to the hospital, but the woman died. Kathy could not come to her senses and could not understand why her mother had done that. Neighbors whispered behind the girl's back. Some said that Molly was in a cult, others that she had gone crazy after losing her husband. When her mother died, Kathy had a difficult period. She was not afraid to go to an orphanage because soon she was going to be 18 years old, but she couldn't get used to living without her mother. Despite the fact that they almost did not communicate with her mother, for many years she was at ease with her. And now she was gone, and it was getting very scary and painful. If Kathy did not have Nancy, she would not be able to survive. A year had passed since then. In time, the girl accepted it and calmed down. Kathy worked in her specialty, gaining experience, even though she received a small salary. Nancy got a boyfriend, Ben, and they started renting an apartment together while she bought suitcases. They were both crying, and she told Kathy, "If you need anything, call Good right away." Kathy nodded, the other wiping away her tears. She really didn't want to be alone, but she couldn't keep her friend around forever either. Soon Kathy also met a guy and immediately fell in love with him with no memory. It was after this short relationship that she became pregnant, and it turned the helpless Kathy into a grown woman who learned to solve her problems on her own. "Kathy, are you sleeping in there?" Nancy stretched out, pulling Kathy out of her thoughts. "So, bride-to-be, are you going to play?" "Yes," said Kathy, not expecting it. She heard Nancy's enthusiastic voice and smiled at her reflection in the mirror. "Kathy, you certainly remembered everything." William was very afraid that the meeting would not go as planned and his parents would figure it out. And if that happened, his mom would start fainting. Or should I make a scene? Daddy will blame his son for not raising him that way, and men don't do that. And if James's older brother finds out about the deception, it's going to get really bad. He will remind the boy for a long time how he introduced his parents to a fake bride. William took a deep breath and looked at Kathy. She smiled and quickly retorted, "My name is Helen. I am 24 years old. I work as a translator for your company." "Okay. And no one will decide to test me on my language skills?" the girl asked excitedly. "I guess not," William thought. "No, they definitely won't. Not Mom, not Dad, I don't know. If James were coming, he might. But he won't be here. His wife's about to have a baby. So it'll be all right." Kathy looked William in the eye, smiled, and continued, "Your mom, Evelyn. Your father, Peter. Good for you. I approve more," the boy said. "What's the best thing to talk about with your mom not cooking?" Kathy replied quickly, "Your mom really likes to cook. So if she hears the name of a dish, she'll want to cook it right away." "That's right," said William, looking at his watch. "But talk to your dad about everything. But don't argue, just keep quiet. Agree?" "Okay, sure. So, then everything's fine. My parents are gonna be here any minute, so let's speed it up. Breathe in, breathe out. I wish you all the best of luck." "Yeah, good luck," Kathy muttered quietly. Her anxiety was growing by the minute. She was beginning to regret getting involved in this venture, but she realized that she was doing it not for the money, but because she really liked William. Besides, Kostya liked the man very much. He kept talking about his uncle, who drove them home, and asked when he would come to visit them. "The guest uncle just gave us a ride. We can't invite him to visit," hugging the boy, Kathy said. "It's a pity. I wish I had a daddy like that." Kathy's son stretched out, dreamily closing his eyes. "Oh, I forgot all about the champagne. I'll go get it from the fridge. In the meantime, You sit back and calm down, William said. On his way to the kitchen, only William left the room. The doorbell rang. "Kathy, go open the door," shouted William. "I'll be right there." The girl went to the front door and took a deep breath, counted to 3, and opened it. The landing was dark. She could hardly see the man standing in front of her. He was standing half sideways, so she couldn't see his face. Kathy naturally thought it was Papa William, so she loudly said, "Hello, Peter. I'm Helen, William's girlfriend." "Come in, William. I'm in the kitchen now." "Where is it?" But she did not have time to finish the last sentence because she saw the face of the man standing in front of her. It couldn't possibly be William's father. "Hello, Helen," he said with a smile. "I'm James, William's brother." And then the light from the apartment hit the man, and Kathy got a full view of the guy. The girl was speechless, but quickly regaining her senses, she shrieked, "You!" James was surprised and began to stare hard at the girl's face. When he recognized her, he cursed softly and then whispered, "What are you doing here?" "Hi, James. You've already met my fiancée." Just then William came back from the kitchen. "Her name is Helen. How did you get here?" "You weren't supposed to be here." "Where are Mom and Dad?" Kathy didn't know how to act at all. She was just in a stupor. Of course she wanted to meet James again and get in his face for doing this to her, but at the moment, she couldn't figure it out. What was the right thing to do? If she started a scandal right now, she'd be setting William up for a lot of trouble. Especially she didn't want to make a fool of herself. James, too, was out of it, unable to control himself, gave Kathy a stern look and turned to his brother and said, "I'll tell you later how I got to you, but for now you go downstairs and help your parents with their suitcases, and you carry their things. Your elevator's broken. I'm gonna rest. Your girlfriend can get me some water. James, water. I'll help my parents." William quickly kicked off his shoes, threw on his jacket, and ran out of the apartment. Kathy looked up at James. She gathered her thoughts, sighed, and wanted to start talking. But no sooner had she opened her mouth than he drove her against the wall and began whispering fiercely in her ear. "Look, I don't understand what you want and what your plans are. How did you even erase your trust in my brother? But I'm not gonna let you deceive him. I was just scaring you, Kathy." She didn't expect that reaction, so she didn't know what to do, which is just, "What do you want from me? How did you even know William was my brother? Did you just decide to finish the thought?" He didn't have time because he heard footsteps and voices outside the door. James stepped away from Kathy just before the door opened, but the girl couldn't move from the shock and just stood there against the wall. "Why are you still on the doorstep?" William asked in surprise. "I thought you had already eaten at the table." "Helen, what are you doing? What's the matter with you?" "James, are you scared?" "Don't worry about it. It's only at first glance." Formidable tried to joke William, trying to spank the girl from the wall. "Yes, it's all right," James said cheerfully. "We just had a deal." "Helen was so interesting. How did you two meet?" "Hello, Helen. Will you tell me how you met the wall?" Evelyn intervened. William's mother had already disrobed and undressed. She took Kathy under her arm and led her into the dining room. The girl was very confused, but she tried not to show it and answered all the questions. William's mother. William did not understand what was happening to Kathy, but he could not get his head around it. His father and brother, right from the doorstep, started pouring out all the news and telling him what interesting things had happened on the way when everyone sat down at the table. The boy tried to ask Kathy what had happened to her. He whispered, "No one has seen it yet." "Kathy, what's wrong with you? Did something happen?" "Yeah, I'm fine." The girl tried to smile. The atmosphere at the table was beginning to irritate. Peter was making a lot of jokes. Kathy laughed at his jokes and answered a lot of Evelyn's questions in parallel. The girl seemed to have calmed down, but she tried not to look at James. True, he himself tried to get on her nerves as often as possible and asked her stupid and sometimes hurtful questions, She paid no attention to it. But William was getting very angry. "James, I don't understand what's wrong. Why are you always clinging to the line? Honestly, I would have thought you liked her if you didn't have a pregnant wife." "I couldn't take it anymore," William said. "Well, why wouldn't I?" "Maybe I did," James grinned. Everyone fell silent, and there was an awkward pause. Evelyn decided to lighten the mood and began to tell interesting and funny stories from William's life. "Imagine," Helen calmly said, "Mother Vida, when Patenka was very small, Mom, carelessly tone," said James, interrupting to describe the writing mother. "You'll have time to tell more about William. Let's find out more about Helena. We don't know anything about her." "Say Helen." He said that name with a special intonation. "Why do you want William? What's so special about him? And we're all curious. Have you ever been married? Maybe you have children." That sentence was the last straw for Kathy. She would have stood for a lot of things, but not that. It was a terrible bullying on James' part to bring her up with children. So his words made the girl feel very hurt. Kathy jumped up from the table and ran out into the hallway. She hurriedly tightened her jacket and tried to fasten it. She couldn't do the latter. She began to cry with despair. William's voice came to the girl, and almost immediately he appeared in front of her. "Kathy, don't go. James just had too much to drink. He's just talking nonsense," William said quietly. "Stay." But she was crying, so she didn't want William to look at her. She didn't want to tell the boy what had happened. William understood, moved close to the girl, touched her cheek, and wiped away her tears. Then he took her chin and looked her straight in the eye. She didn't resist. She raised her head and looked into William's eyes too. The guy couldn't help himself and gently kissed the girl's lips. It was a completely innocent kiss, but it stirred up a lot of emotions in her. It was as if he relieved the accumulated tension, allowed Kathy to forget about everything and calm down. All that was left was lightness and a sense of flight. William pulled away but was still too close, so she could feel his hot breath. It made her body run with goosebumps. "Please don't go away," William said quietly, in a husky voice that noted the striking notes in it. "After all, I'd better go." The girl tried to come to her senses more quickly and convey confidence in her voice. "You, apologize for me to my parents. Tell them I got sick. You have a good mom and dad. I don't want to hurt them, especially since I've already played my part. I gotta go." While the girl was afraid to change her mind, so she quickly turned around and already went out into the entranceway. But William suddenly said, "No, one thing I definitely will not let you go. Wait, I'll warn my parents and see you off." She did not argue and was rolled against the wall in the entryway and began to wait for William. Through the open door, the girl could hear William saying something to his parents. His mother's voice reached her, arguing and speaking in a slightly annoyed tone. "We can all go now," William said as he stepped out into the entryway. He was already dressed. Yes, the guy and the girl walked out of the entryway in silence, but William wanted to know what had really happened, so he tried to start a conversation. "If you want, can we call a cab?" he asked. "I'm not going to drive. You know, I've been drinking, but let's walk. I need a breath of fresh air." "James hurt you. To be honest, we don't understand with his parents what's wrong with him today. Maybe something happened. He's not making any sense at all." "What's he saying?" Kathy asked quietly. She realized that William's brother could say some nasty things about her. Of course, she knew that she and William had no future, but she didn't want the guy to treat her badly. She liked him a lot. "Well, for example, when I was leaving, he said, 'You're cheating on all of us. Anyway, James thinks you're not who you say you are.'" Pulled a William. "You know," he said it so confidently, like he knows you're not my girlfriend. "Because he does know," Kathy answered almost in a whisper. William looked at her in surprise and stopped. "I don't get it. How could he possibly know that?" "Do you know him?" Kathy didn't want to answer, so she just kept quiet. But the guy didn't relent and kept pelting her with questions. Well, why didn't he just say that you two knew each other? Was there something between you two? Because wait, the girl touched up to the guy's shoulder to reassure him. I don't really think your brother wants you to know that. We didn't have a very pleasant encounter. I'm sure he's regretted a bunch of times that your dad's car broke down and he had to come over, Kathy said. After all, I'm right that if your dad's car hadn't broken down, James wouldn't have come and recognized someone posing as your fiancé. If it hadn't been for that accident, none of this would have happened. Kathy tried to gather her thoughts, at which point William said, Kathy, why didn't he just pretend he didn't know you? As I recall, you didn't throw a fight at him. Or did I miss something? Of course not. I didn't lash out at him. I was actually shocked when I saw him. I'd be less surprised if it was like Brad Pitt. Why Brad Pitt? The guy smiled slightly. Well, I just like Brad Pitt and his name came to mind, quickly said Kathy. But that's not what this is about right now. Got it. So tell me, how do you know James? Look, why don't you let him tell you? The girl didn't want to talk about her affair with James. She hated to remember how stupid she'd been a few years ago. I'll talk to him too, don't worry. But right now, I want to hear your side of the story. As far as I can tell, it's not a pleasant story. So I'd like to hear both sides of the story. Kathy exhaled loudly, clenched her fists, said James. Bones' father. What? William shrieked loudly. Passing by an old lady with a dog on a leash, even jumped with fear and said loudly, You are not ashamed. Young man, you can't behave like that. I beg your pardon. William replied sharply. He was not interested in being polite and wanted to know the details. William stared at Kathy in silence, and the old woman, who had recently been frightened by the boys shouting, began to come closer and closer to them. She was curious as to what they were talking about. Kathy noticed this and relented. The woman, with an annihilating stare. The granny gave the girl a displeased look and grabbed her chit in her arms and carried her away. I told you that our history of acquaintance with James is not the most pleasant, Kathy said in a calm tone. But I didn't expect this, either, said William, who had recovered from the shock. But I don't understand how. How can he be the father of the bone? I mean, he lives in another city and doesn't come here. There's just no way. The guy started to shift to screaming again. He was having a hard time keeping his cool right now, and there were many reasons for that. He liked the girl so much that he even wanted to ask her out on a date or invite them and their bones, for example, to the circus or to the Christmas tree. What the guy found out changed everything. He did not know how he should act now, how to behave. And in general, the news that James has a child, which he does not bring up, was in itself shocking. For William, his brother had always been an example and authority. But such an act held James back in William's eyes. William had always wanted to look up to her older brother. James was a cheerful, athletic build with great ambition. But the fact that he abandoned his own child undermined James' authority completely. I mean, I just couldn't believe it. You didn't tell me how we met, the guy reminded him. He was afraid Kathy would go home now and he'd never find out. I literally fell at his feet quietly, said the girl. Well, how about a little more detail? They were almost at Kathy's house, and William began to realize that she was just stalling and didn't want to say anything. But he couldn't just let her go. My friend Nancy asked me out on a double date. Her boyfriend Ben was supposed to bring his friend. The girl started the story. She'd been wanting to set me up with someone for a long time, but I hadn't said yes. That day, I finally gave in. Kathy sighed heavily. We went to a club, and this guy at the club had a few too many drinks and started hitting on me. And then he dragged me to the bathroom. Well, you know what for. Freak, William gritted his teeth. He was terribly angry at the girl's story. His face was twisted with anger. Yes, I agree with you. Kathy, I couldn't see William's face because it was already dark outside, so she didn't pay attention to his condition. That's what I told him then. and then I decided to leave. Nancy wanted to walk me out, but I said I'd call a cab. And I wanted to walk. I was wearing terribly uncomfortable shoes, long stilettos, so it was very difficult for me to walk. I almost made it home though. And I was just passing that store. Kathy turned around and pointed William toward the store they had just passed. The boy nodded as a sign that he understood. My heel got stuck between the tiles. I twisted my foot and started to fall. James was just coming out of the store, but of course I didn't know that was his name at the time. So he helped me up and offered to walk me home, Kathy said. And William just listened silently. He walked me home, and we stood talking for a long time near the driveway. Then Ben offered to have coffee, but I didn't invite him in. He walked me out, and we stood chatting for a long time. Then James offered to have coffee, but I didn't invite him back to my place. So we went and got takeout coffee and went back to the driveway. We chatted some more, and I went home. Then Ben called me, asked me out. We went to a movie, then to a cafe. And so began our brief romance. The girl finished dryly. They were already standing just outside her house. She wanted to close the door quickly to finish this unpleasant conversation. And then what happened? William persisted. You'd have to ask your brother. I think you'll like his version better. Kathy turned around and wanted to go into the entryway, but William grabbed her arm tightly. Please tell me what happened next. She looked him straight in the eyes, in the lamplight. He saw that there were tears in her eyes. He realized that she did not want to tell him anything more, that she wanted to run away, to hide. But he couldn't let her go because it was important for him to know the truth. He tried to ignore the girl's tears, which rolled down her face in large drops. The boy repeated his question. Kathy, what happened next? Next, you wondered. What happened next? Shouted the girl and pulled her hand out of the man's hand. What happened next was the happiest months of my life, you know. I fell in love with James, and I was willing to do anything for him. And I was sure he would love me back as much as I loved him. But it turned out I was wrong. I was so stupid, and he took advantage of it. The girl covered her face with her hands, turned away from William, and cried harder. The boy was silent. He didn't know what to do. He realized that the girl would not go anywhere and would tell him everything. But now he was worried about something else. He couldn't deal with his emotions. William wanted incredibly badly to give in to the urge and hug her. This fragile and helpless girl. He wanted not just to hug her, but to hold her with all his strength and comfort her like a little girl. He would certainly have given in to this impulse if it had not been about his brother, but about some other strange man. But unfortunately, the girl was telling a story about James, so William had to make an effort not to hold her against him right now. He just hid his hands in his pockets where he clenched and balled his fists. It helped a little, distracted him, and calmed him down. And then 2 months later, James was gone. Kathy continued the story. Her voice had changed a lot. It sounded muffled and detached. Tears were no longer running down her cheeks, and her face was pale and frightened. You see, the man I loved just disappeared without saying a word to me. She spoke in a cold voice full of pain. I called him all day, all night, and another day, but he just disconnected the phone. I almost lost my mind. I was afraid that something had happened to him. So I went to the police, but they just laughed at me. They said my lover was just fed up with me. So he disappeared. Do you know what the worst part is? Kathy looked William straight in the eye, that after the words of the police I came to my senses. I started to realize everything. After all, I didn't know anything about this guy I'd been seeing for the past 2 months. I didn't even know his last name or where he worked, for example. William couldn't believe she was telling this about James. He had no reason not to trust Kathy. The boy could see the pain in her eyes as she told her story. William believed her, and he was getting really nasty. So disgusting he wanted to go to the showers to wash the filth off himself. Well, anyway, I was completely depressed. I didn't want to live. I couldn't work. I couldn't eat. I couldn't leave the house. All I could do was lie there and stare at the ceiling. If it hadn't been for Nancy's support, I would have done something to myself. Kathy wrinkled her nose as if her patriarchy was howling at these horrible events. And soon after, I found out I was pregnant. Kathy, I apologize, of course, for that question. Are you sure Liam is James? William said it and immediately regretted his words. Kathy changed abruptly. She looked at the boy with eyes full of hatred, her face twisted with anger. The girl pulled out and gave Veda a ringing slap of evil, saying at the same time, "Male solidarity is right," shouted Kathy. "I don't care if you think your brother is white and fluffy. That's your business. But you asked me to tell you everything. And I told you it as hard as it was. It wasn't for me. I'm sorry I met you and agreed to help you. Goodbye." She quickly turned around and ran toward the entryway. "Kathy, wait," shouted William. "I didn't mean that. I'm sorry." But the girl had already run to the entrance and slammed the door behind her. Kathy got to the apartment and opened the door with the key. She sank to the floor right in the hallway and began to sob, as loudly as she could. She was utterly desperate, and she was really, really hurting. William walked home, immersed in his thoughts. He blamed himself for saying words that hurt the girl, but there was no way he could fix it. Besides, he tried to think about the future conversation with his brother. The conversation would definitely have to take place. The boy would not be able to sleep until he heard James's version of what had happened with Kathy. William walked into Evelyn's apartment. She had already put everything away and washed the dishes. She was now sitting in an armchair watching her favorite show. Peter was sitting on the couch, dozing. James was nowhere to be seen. So how badly did Helen resent James? Asked, worried mother. The boy did not understand who his mother was talking about, but then it came to him. And William said, "No, she's fine. She's just a little sick. But to be honest, I'm totally shocked by my brother's behavior. Yes, son. I don't know what happened to him. He was different. I tried to talk to him afterwards, to find out what was wrong with his behavior, but he wouldn't tell me anything. I mean, he said something, but my father and I didn't understand. All right, Mom, I'll talk to him myself. Go to bed. You're leaving tomorrow, aren't you?" "Yes, of course we are. We're driving a serious car. And his girlfriend's due soon. He can't be away for too long." The mother said her daughter-in-law's name in a special tone of voice. She was never able to accept her son's wife and love her. Well, she kind of accepted her. But here the daughter-in-law was shy mother-in-law and avoided communicating with her. The guy did not know what exactly happened between his mother and Emily and never got involved with questions. It was none of his business. And now he didn't bother his mom, kissed her cheek, covered with a thin web of wrinkles, and said, "Okay, Mom, I'll go. Good night. Lead the way, please, but don't swear, James. Remember, he's your brother." "Yes, yes, of course," replied William and smiled. He did not realize that he would soon forget that he was related to James. William entered the room and saw that his brother was already asleep on the bed. He couldn't and didn't want to wait until morning, so he started to wake him up. "James, wake up." William shook his brother by the shoulder. He opened his eyes, tried to focus his gaze on William, and said, "Get off me. Let me sleep." "No, James, come on, get up. We need to talk." "What conversation?" "Just James trying to sit up in bed. And yourself do not guess about your behavior, about your attitude to my fiancé," replied William. The guy did not call the girl by name, so that his brother could tell him everything. "Listen, this is your favorite bride, Helen. It's not Helen at all. Her name is Kathy, and I think she has a kid." James answered, "Really? How do you know that?" "Well, about the name and the baby," William asked in a surprised tone. James gave his brother a confused look. He realized that he had said too much, but he wanted to protect William from this girl's deception. In truth, he didn't want to talk to his brother about it at all. After all, I do not want to go into details. You just need to take my word for it that this girl is not your match at all. But I'm serious." "No way, James," William said. "No way. I want to know everything from the very beginning to the very end, from the story of your acquaintance to the moment why you left her pregnant." As William walked home, you were still hoping that James didn't know about Kathy's pregnancy, but now, looking at him, he realized that his brother knew everything. He didn't understand how James could leave her so easily and not be involved in his own son's life. "All right, if you want to, I'll tell you. But I have a condition." James grinned. "What's that?" "Not my parents, not my wife, can't know about this." William thought for a moment, then said, "Okay, I promise I won't tell." He didn't want to tell anyone himself. His parents would be very upset about it. And he didn't want to ruin his brother's family because his wife was about to have a baby. "But I'm waiting impatiently," said William. "How long are you going to keep quiet? Come on, start talking. Don't rush me. Let me get my thoughts together," said James thoughtfully. "I don't know where to start." "Well, tell me, for example, where did you meet? And in general, how did you end up in this city?" "You have no idea," James said with a laugh. "You really don't remember. You moved here and bought an apartment. And about a month later, I came to this town. Do you remember when Emily's father opened a branch of the company here and asked me to supervise?" "I remember," William nodded. "Okay, that's taken care of. Now let's get on to getting to know Kathy. Did you know that my introduction to Kathy was your fault?" James smiled. "If it hadn't been for you, I never would have met her." "I don't know what you mean, my fault. But it was you who sent me to your apartment late at night to check on the repairs." "That's the day I met Kathy." William remembered that when his brother had come to visit, he had actually asked him to check on the apartment several times. At that time, William had just moved to this city, but he had prepared for the move in advance, found a job, bought an apartment, started to renovate the apartment, but did not have time to finish it. The company management demanded that he go to work. So William hired a team of builders, and they began to finish his initial repair. The guy himself stayed in rented accommodation for the time being. William all the time disappeared in the office, so there was no time to check the work of the masters. Then James came to town, and William immediately told him that it would not be possible to stay in his apartment because of the repairs. During the time James was in town, William only met him a few times. But James often checked his brother's apartment at his request to keep an eye on the workers. One day, William asked James to check on the apartment late at night. He got a call from a neighbor telling him that something was going on there. Loud music was playing. Girls were laughing and a speaker was working. This alarmed the neighbor, so she called William just to warn him. "After all, I couldn't get away from work, so I asked to check my brother's apartment. Apparently, that's the day he met Senia." "But what did you remember?" James smiled, watching William's reaction. He nodded. "Yeah, I guessed, probably when I went to check on the apartment after the neighbor called. Let's say you met Kathy. But it's not like I made you drag her to bed." A little angrily, William said, "You were getting ready to get married at the time. And anyway, I thought you were really in love with Emily." "Love with Emily?" James started to shout hysterically, but quickly lowered his voice so as not to wake his parents. "What love? What do you even know about our relationship with Emily?" "I myself have never understood why you with this girl," talked William, who always hid his attitude to his brother's chosen one. "No, she's certainly a beautiful, showy girl, but it's as if she has no soul in her. I remember that you never showed any sympathy for her. So you were surprised when you decided to get married." "Surprised?" James stretched out. "Why did I suddenly decide to go out with her?" "I didn't have the wit." William shrugged nonchalantly. It was strange to him that his brother was talking to him that way, and that there was so much irritation and anger in his voice. The longer the brothers talked, the more questions William had. James's story was not yet clear. He wanted to know more quickly. "Tell me that the money had made him sound squeamish." "Yes, dear brother, you wouldn't believe it, But you guessed right, James said with a chuckle. To be exact, my father-in-law did everything. So I had no choice. I got so deep in business with him that I just couldn't get out, James clarified. Looking somewhere through his brother, he was silent for a few moments, thinking for a moment, then continued. William realized that his brother, who had always been hiding something, had finally decided to speak up. He just couldn't keep it all to himself. James remained silent for a few minutes, thinking, gathering his thoughts, and then continued again. The first time I met Emily's father was at her birthday party. We were at her house. There were about 15 people there. At one point, Emily's dad came over, and the guys started going home. It was just me, Emily, and about 4 other people. He saw us drinking, but he didn't say a word. He just sat down at the table and asked for a clean plate to eat his dinner. I wanted to leave too, but the birthday girl tearfully asked me to stay. So, giving in to her entreaties, I stayed a little longer. James said in a calm voice, and then exclaimed, I was a fool. If I had left, my life would have been very different. James. Oh, don't give me that, William waved him away. As usual, you have everyone to blame but yourself. The boy didn't even try to hide his irritation. It hurt him that the image of the perfect older brother was crumbling before his eyes. And he was also disappointed that now their relationship with his brother would forever change for the better. William was sure of it. Okay, look, why don't I just leave it at that? James grumbled unhappily. He'd hoped his brother would be supportive. But William wasn't going to sympathize with him. So James went on with his story. Okay, Nick's presence made us a little uncomfortable at first, but as time went on, we relaxed. Emily's father talked to us, asked us all kinds of questions, and we answered him. The conversation was quite relaxed. He asked me where I was going to go to college. At first I didn't want to answer, because I was sure that I wouldn't be able to get into the university I dreamed of. But Nick wouldn't back down, so I told him everything. He grinned strangely and left the room. And when he came back, he had a sheet in his hand, on which he asked me to write down my information. Name, phone number, the date of birth I did as he said, and gave the sheet back. I finally got accepted, and that's when it hit me. That Emily's father helped you get in. William interrupted his brother. Yeah, sort of, James replied. To be more precise, I was helped by a friend of his, who was a rector at the university. He and Nick used to go to the sauna on Saturdays. After that, he helped me with my job too. How? You said you were lucky. You won some competition, and you were offered the job. William said in surprise. What else was I supposed to tell you? I just wanted Mom and Dad to be proud of me and think that I'd achieved everything on my own, James said quietly. And I was thrilled that I was able to get into the institute of my dreams. Then I got a good high-paying job. I even started dating a girl, Anna, whom I liked very much. But it was not as easy as I thought. What do you mean? William wondered. I believe that I was just lucky to meet such a kind and influential man as Nick. Ignoring his brother, James continued to speak, but then I got a call from an unknown number. I answered. It was Emily's father, who asked me to come to his office. He said he had something urgent to talk to me about. I went, of course, because I had no idea what was going to happen next. There was silence, but William already knew how this story would end. He couldn't believe that James had really gotten himself into such a terrible mess. William was an honest and upright man, and was sure his brother was the same. But this filth that is part of his brother's life came as a shock. James wanted to finish the story quickly, so he continued. When I arrived at Nick's workplace, we had an interesting conversation. He asked me how I felt about his daughter, if I liked her, and if I would like to date her. I replied that she was a nice girl, and I felt great about her, but immediately told him about Anna, that I was in love with her and we were dating. He reacted to my response with resentment, saying that his daughter has been going crazy for a long time, and he would love it if I dumped my Anna and started dating Emily. I tried to explain that this is impossible, I only see Emily as my friend. I talked for a long time trying to make it as friendly as possible, but Nick wouldn't listen. Anyway, at some point Nick changed the subject and started asking about my studies and work. I told him everything was great, and he replied that it would be a pity if I was expelled and fired. To his words, I don't understand. Also objected that I have everything excellent in the institute and at work. For what reasons could I be expelled and fired? He only then grinned and wished me luck. About a week later, the instructor tried to fail me on an exam. He asked questions that we had not studied at all during the semester. Money went missing at work, and the shortage was pinned on me. I understood why it was happening, and I didn't want to go along with Emily's father. You could have asked your parents for help. So what happened? Where are we and where is Emily's father, who owns a big business and knows a lot of powerful people? Don't be ridiculous, Will. Are you exaggerating? William tried to object. I don't think your father-in-law is as omnipotent as you describe. No, brother, James said with a chuckle. Maybe I'm understating things, but I'm certainly not exaggerating. I didn't realize what an authority figure he was before it either, but now I know what extensive connections and influential friends he has. So do I go on, or are we going to argue? Go ahead. Anyway, after that conversation, I started having problems. I was trying to keep up, and I was torn between my uni job and Anna. When I was almost out of energy, Nick called me again. He asked me how I was doing, how my studies were, how my job was. Asked me to come up to his office again. There he offered to help me, that he could work things out. But in exchange, I had to go out with Emily, and he had one condition. Emily must never find out about our arrangement. I didn't want to agree honestly, but I was well aware that if I refused, Nick would get to me for good. James was silent for a moment, and then said in a quiet, calm tone, "Do you know, William, what was the hardest thing for me to do?" "What?" "Dumping Anna. I really liked her. I've never felt that way about anyone before, but I chose money, career, and comfort." With a slight chuckle, said James, "You have nothing at all for Veronica." William was important to know that. Well, how can I put it? James stretched out. I don't love her, but she makes me feel safe and good. No fire, no passion. It's hard for me to explain. It's just a habit. We live and let live. But if my father-in-law hadn't encouraged me to get involved with Emily, I never would have started seeing her. William sighed heavily. He hated hearing all this, but they hadn't gotten to the hardest part of his brother's story yet. "All right," William said. "I think we're clear on Emily. But wait, there's something else I want to clarify." "What?" James looked at his brother in surprise. "Don't be shy, I'm asking. It's her night of revelations, so you can find out anything you want to know. Why didn't you just leave Emily? I mean, you had some problems and you were separated. Why did you go back to her if you didn't love her? I think that's when you started getting ready to get married." "So much. Why?" James muttered. "I don't know why. I guess I just got used to it. To her beautiful life, to her lack of problems. I realized that as soon as I leave her, I'll be fired from my job, and I'll lose everything I've worked so hard to achieve. My father-in-law would never forgive me. I was trapped. Emily did a lot to make me want to leave her, though. Then one day, she changed. Started being jealous of me at every post, checking my social media accounts, calling me hysterically all the time. But I never had a chance to change her. We were always there for each other. I only left for work. If I started an affair there, someone would immediately knock Nick," James muttered. "Well, then I don't understand how she let you go on a business trip for 2 whole months. It's just a coincidence, I guess," my brother replied. "I didn't expect to be so lucky at all," the man said. "The stars have aligned just right. First of all, I didn't ask for this trip. Nick sent me. He loves his daughter, of course, but she tries not to argue with him. Secondly, she couldn't come with me because her father had just found her a great place to build a beauty parlor. She has long dreamed of her own business, so she could not miss such an opportunity. After all, it was necessary to quickly draw up the documents and start making repairs, and Emily wanted to control the whole process from start to finish. Anyway, she agonized for a long time, but decided that everything would be all right. She couldn't miss the opportunity to realize herself and show everyone that she could do everything herself. Got it. She fulfilled her dream. As far as I know, her salon is doing well, William clarified. Yes, it's doing well. But that's not her fault. It's Nick's, James said, waving his hand. But that's not what this is about. I left for this town, and Emily's been calling me almost every hour to check on me, to see what I was up to. She wanted to come over a bunch of times, but I kept calming her down. It wasn't very far away, so I'd drive myself to see her. And then things kind of settled down. She got busy with the salon, so she just didn't have time to control me. That's where Kathy came in. So, you met her and immediately decided to cheat on your girlfriend. I interrupted my brother, William. No, of course not. I wasn't going to cheat on anyone. It's just the smell of freedom. You know, it's a bonding experience. The first time I saw Kathy, she was upside down, trying to keep her balance, you know. Well, she's got a nice ass, so I couldn't resist. I decided to help the lovely girl. William was silent. He listened attentively to his brother, but he didn't like the words that Kathy had a nice ass. It made him feel something unpleasant. James didn't notice the change in his brother, so he just continued with his story. When Kathy changed, I saw that she was okay in the front too. Nice face, nice breasts, waist, legs all on her. That's how we got it going. James smiled. And you know what struck me most? Said William in a lost voice, who realized that his feelings of resentment and hatred for his brother were growing more and more. She was a virgin. James laughed, emphasizing the last word. I couldn't believe it when she told me. I thought she was just putting on an act. But when we got to the point, and I realized she wasn't lying, I was very. But James didn't have time to finish, because William jumped up and punched his brother. James hadn't expected such a turn, so he didn't even have time to dodge. The fist hit him squarely in the jaw. That's why there was blood coming out of his lip. What are you doing? Shouted at the top of his voice James. You'll be quiet, William whispered angrily. Are you out of your mind? James asked, surprised by his brother's behavior. William said, holding out a handkerchief to James. Whereupon I said, I'm not at all. I'm just shocked that you, my brother, played with a girl and then left her pregnant. How could you do that? I thought my brother was a real man who could take responsibility for his actions. And he was. William waved his hand at his brother and headed out of the room. And you're so right, aren't you? James grinned, pressing his handkerchief to his lips. I'm just a normal person, living the way my parents taught me, and I don't do anything mean. I don't understand why you're so full of shit, William said hatefully and walked over to his brother. He didn't want to talk to him, but he had to know everything to the end. So he asked the main question. Tell me, did you know that Kathy was expecting a child? I didn't know anything when I left, James said, touching his lip and wincing at the pain. His jaw ached terribly, blood was coming out, and James was angry at his brother, at himself, and at Kathy, who was to blame for everything, according to the man. When you found out she was pregnant, after a while she somehow inexplicably found me on social networks and wrote honestly. I was shocked when I saw her message. I mean, she didn't even know my last name. The SIM card, the number of which she knew and immediately threw away. It was a working, simple phone at work, said that I lost it. They gave me a new one. Why'd you run away? You didn't even call her or break up with her like a real jerk. And when you found out she was pregnant, you didn't contact her either. Why not? Yours again. Why did James get angry? You're asking why. What could I possibly have said to her? I don't know, William said in a near whisper. You could have at least said a proper goodbye instead of just disappearing. Do you really think that's what she wanted? With a chuckle, James answered, wincing at the pain of the blow. Probably not. William shrugged. But when she told you she was pregnant, why didn't you contact her? That's what I don't understand. So what? What difference would it have made? James asked harshly, looking his brother straight in the eye. William just shook his head, and James continued. Exactly. It wouldn't have changed anything. I wasn't going to break up with Emily, so I didn't answer Kathy. I'd had a good time with her, of course, but that wasn't it. With her, I felt like a student who couldn't afford luxury gifts for a girl. She glowed with happiness when I brought her a crumpled rose bought in the underpass, or offered to drink coffee and eat a hiked dosha. But I didn't want to live like that. Emily and my father-in-law showed me a very different life, a more expensive one. I guess I would have understood you and could justify you somehow, said William. But I will never understand how you could not even ask about your child's fate. Stop, James said with a chuckle. Actually, I only knew about the pregnancy, the baby, and she didn't tell me. Kathy disappeared and never wrote to me again. That's why I thought she'd had an abortion. Shut up, William threw. I don't even want to hear it. You're just a coward and a moral freak. I'm ashamed that you're my brother. William left the room. The apartment was already quiet. Apparently, the parents were asleep. The guy tried to walk as quietly as possible to the corridor, took his jacket, and went out into the entrance. He didn't want to stay in the apartment. He needed a breath of fresh air immediately. This conversation had ruined his relationship with his brother, most likely forever. Kathy sat on the couch, holding the bones in her lap. They were looking at the multicolored lights on the Christmas tree. The girl was sad. Christmas was due in a couple hours, and Kathy was trying to understand. Why was she feeling so homesick? It hadn't been a bad year. Liam had hardly been sick at all. She'd gotten a pay rise and life had gotten a lot easier. In fact, she understood everything. It was William and his sneaky brother who had spoiled her impression of the past year. She regretted having met William because it made her have to remember one of the worst events in her life. After Kathy had slapped William back, she thought he would never appear in her life again. But that turned out not to be the case. He called her all the next day, but she didn't pick up. He kept calling and calling. So Kathy just blacklisted him. But that didn't help the girl calm down either. She wanted to get away from sad thoughts and heavy memories, so she looked at her son and asked Liam, "What do you think Santa Claus will put under your Christmas tree?" Kathy already knew the answer to that question. Liam dreamed of a railroad, but the one her son really liked cost too much. The girl simply could not afford such a purchase. But fortunately, she had a best friend who was happy to help Kathy out. "What's the matter, Kathy? Aren't I adding money for my godson's dream?" Indignantly, Nancy opened her wallet and added the missing amount to Kathy. The girl couldn't wait to fulfill her son's dream. But when she heard the answer to her question, she was simply shocked. "I want a daddy," clearly uttered the child. Daddy stretched out the girl in surprise, but Bone. "They don't put dads under Christmas trees." "Too bad," the boy sighed heavily. "I would have liked that so much. Why does everyone at daycare have dads and I don't?" Kathy wanted to answer her son's question, but then the doorbell rang. "So I'll go and see who it is that came to us, and we'll talk," the girl said calmly. "Who you think it might be?" Kathy knew that Nancy and Ben had gone to the Alps for the holidays, so it certainly wasn't them, and no one else could have come to them. "Who's there?" asked Kathy, and looked through the peephole. "Santa Claus was heard from behind the door, but I didn't order it." "Did you make a mistake?" shouted the girl, not planning to open the door. Liam could see the animator and get upset, and she had no money, offered her a discount. But even with it, the price for Santa Claus services was exorbitant. The girl moved away from the door, but the call was repeated. "What on earth do you want?" grumbled Kathy, and opened the door. "I didn't order Santa Claus," clearly said the girl, so that the man understood her. "We can talk," Santa Claus skipped the beard a little, and Kathy recognized him immediately. It was William in his Santa Claus costume. He looked great, like he was a real fairy tale wizard. But Kathy wasn't impressed with the surprise. "No, go away," through gritted teeth, she said, trying to speak as quietly as possible. "We have nothing to talk about. I've played the part. We shouldn't see each other anymore. Goodbye." "Kathy, why are you doing this to me?" "Yeah, my brother's a jerk, but it's not my fault. It's not fair to me. It's not fair." The girl was surprised. "You can't deny me the opportunity to communicate with my own nephew." The guy said seriously, "Come on with your nephew. You doubt it's your brother's son. We have nothing to talk about," shouted Kathy and slammed the door. "Mom, who's that?" Liam suddenly stepped out into the hallway. "No one, just made a mistake," said the girl. She took her son by the hand and led him into the hall. But then the doorbell rang again. "I told you you were wrong. Goodbye," Kathy shouted angrily, loud enough to be heard outside the door. "Who's that?" asked the boy, coming close to the door. Santa Claus came from William's cheerful bass. Mommy, it's Santa Claus. Open up quickly," joyfully shouted the boy, clapping his hands. "Son, Uncle's joking. It's not Santa Claus," said the girl to her son and turned to the door. "I told you to go away. I'll call the police." The girl hoped this would scare William into leaving. But no, the guy rang the doorbell again. Kathy sighed heavily, and the boy ran to the door again and shouted, "Who's there?" "It's Santa Claus. I brought you presents. I know your name is." Liam spoke William to the boy. He realized that only with the help of his nephew would he be able to get into the apartment. "I'm right. I also know you've been good all year, so you'll get presents." Liam stood by the door, holding his breath. Kathy was terribly angry, so she swung the doors open to put the guy in his place, but immediately regretted her decision. Liam saw Santa Claus and rushed over to hug him. "It's the real Santa Claus. Mommy, look, Santa Claus even knows my name. And you didn't want to let him in. But he's real." Excitedly, the child shouted all the way down the stairs. He grabbed Santa Claus by the sleeve and started dragging him into the apartment. "Santa Claus, come on in. We got potatoes and a nice salad. Come on in, we got a treat for you." The girl realized she couldn't get rid of William now. The guy was fun. He gladly stepped into the apartment and went with the boy to the table. Kathy, however, tried to show her displeasure, but she failed. She was pleased to see William playing with her son and how happy the child was. Strangely enough, they quickly found a common language. Liam was diligently telling Santa Claus a poem he had recently learned with his mother. "What did you get a present for?" "A huge construction set." The boy just squealed with happiness. "Well, now Kathy closes his eyes and you. Santa Claus has presents for everyone," said William. "No, I'm a big girl now, Kathy." I tried not to look at him. "So what? Girls get presents too, don't they, Liam?" Santa Claus said cheerfully and winked at the boy. "Mom, come on, closing your eyes and putting your palms up." "Come on, Kathy, closing your eyes and putting up your palms." The girl stubbornly shook her head negatively, but then Liam intervened in the conversation. "Mom, why are you so mean? You can't argue with Santa Claus. Let's close it. Please, Mom." Santa Claus is now offended and will leave and will never come to us again, he said. The girl had to obey. She closed her eyes and reached out her hand to William. Suddenly, something small and cold touched her hand. Kathy opened her eyes and saw a bracelet with a small pendant that said family on it. "Kathy, you are my family now." William spoke softly, looking into her eyes. For the rest of the evening, Kathy was overcome with confused feelings. On the one hand, she was happy. She felt incredibly warm watching William play with her son. She had never seen Kostya so happy. The boy ran up to his mom all evening and said, "Mom, we have a real Santa Claus visiting us. Can you imagine? A real one." Kathy only smiled in response to his words. On the other hand, she was afraid. She was afraid that when the chimes struck, William would disappear and she would be left alone again with a child who lacked male attention. It was 11:40 on the clock. Liam suddenly fell asleep right on the floor next to the new constructions that Santa Claus had given him. "Move him to the bed," William asked in a whisper, looking at Kathy. She nodded. The man took the sleeping boy in his arms and carried him into the room. The boy was so tired from playing with the fairy wizard that he didn't even wake up. William laid him on the bed and covered him with a blanket. He didn't want to think about his brother at all, who had decided to cowardly run away the morning after the conversation. But he couldn't just run away like that. Nervous, he quickly pulled up his shoes, causing him to drop his shoes in nice. His mom woke up from the rumble. "Ben, where are you going?" asked the worried woman. Peter appeared behind her, and William, who stood and tried to hide a wry smile. But he wasn't very good at it. "Hey, Mom." He didn't want to think about his brother at all, who had decided to cowardly run away the morning after the conversation. But he couldn't just run away like that. Nervous, he quickly pulled up his shoes, causing him to drop his shoes in nice. His mom woke up from the rumble. "Ben, where are you going?" asked the worried woman. Peter appeared behind her, and William, who stood and tried to hide a wry smile. But he wasn't very good at it. "Hey, Mom, it wasn't Emily who called. I think she's in labor." James lied, trying not to look at Evelyn. "I have to leave right away." "How are we going to get there?" asked William and James' father. The parents were very surprised that their son wanted to just run away without telling them anything. "We don't have a car. How are we going to get there?" "I thought you said you could drive us to your aunt's." "Well, nothing. You'll figure it out somehow." Threw the guy. Quickly ran out of the apartment. "Go catch up with him," said William's mother. "Or rather, let him wait for us while we get ready." William ran after his brother, but not to persuade him to come back. He just wanted to look into his eyes one more time and say a few words of farewell. He didn't like it, of course, but he needed to finish last night's conversation. James had already gotten into the car and was about to close the door, but then he heard his brother's voice. "But you're a coward. I thought you'd think about it and tell Mom and Dad. If your son doesn't have a normal father, he could have loving grandparents and an uncle. And you turned out to be such a coward, running away with your tail between your legs again." The boy looked at his brother with contempt. He really wanted to hit him again, but he held back because he realized that his mother was watching them from the window. "Who are you to tell me how to live my life?" James hissed through his teeth. "I'm not going to lose everything I have because of a mistake I made a few years ago because of some girl's momentary weakness." William would not listen to him. He knew that if he stayed, he wouldn't be able to help himself. They would fight again. He turned and walked toward the driveway. If his mother saw him hit him, he would have to tell them everything. But he didn't want to. Why would he? It wouldn't do anyone any good. So William tried to keep his common sense and just walk away. "Wait," James called out to his brother. Well, William turned to him. "Now you're going to tell the parents everything about Kathy, about the baby." "No, but if I were you, I'd do it myself." "But you're a coward." William smirked. "That's right. I'm sure you won't," James said, ignoring his brother's words. "That's right. It's not my truth." William climbed the stairs, but he was in no hurry to enter the apartment. He was too annoyed, so he wanted to calm down a little. He didn't want to tell anyone anything, not even because he was worried about his parents' reaction. He felt sorry for James' wife and future child. The guy didn't want to interfere in someone else's life and ruin his brother's marriage. But he really wanted to support Kathy and her son, who his brother didn't care about. William decided that he wanted to socialize with them, to help them. But he didn't realize that very soon he would love them with all his heart. "Ben did leave after all?" Evelyn asked excitedly. "I saw him out the window." "Why didn't you stop him?" her mother began to ask. His mom called him Emily. She's very worried and not feeling well. William's parents were about to arrive, and she couldn't calm down. Kathy, pull yourself together, William said quietly and put his arm around the girl's shoulders. Everything will be all right, I promise. But she hardly listened to him. She was terribly nervous and couldn't help it. The doorbell rang. It made Kathy look very pale. William went to open it. Hi, Dad. The girl heard the cheerful voice of William. Well, how did it go out? Great, and I want to introduce you to my favorite girl. Meet her, said the guy, entering the living room. This is Kathy. So we're Evelyn, she started to say, but immediately glassed. Kathy, you said this was Helen. I don't understand anything anymore. William, please explain. The woman slowly sank down on the chair. Peter did the same. Yes, of course, now said the guy, gathering his thoughts last time. I deceived you a little. I didn't really have a girlfriend, Lena. I said so you wouldn't worry about how my personal life was turning out. But when you said you were coming to meet my fiancé, I was terrified. So I started looking for someone who could play this difficult role. But things didn't go according to plan. And I did find my love, Kathy, said the guy, hugged Kathy and smiled at his parents. So, wait, Mom. Give all the details later, interrupted the guy. You wanted me to be happy. I am now happier than ever, said William and paused. What else? I also have a son. What? What son? For Evelyn looked completely confused. I don't understand. Kathy's pregnant. No, but she has a beautiful boy named Liam. I want to marry Kathy and adopt him. But that's a big responsibility. Someone else's baby. No, Mom, it's not someone else's baby. He's my own, and I love him. You will too, I'm sure, said the kid. Really? Kathy, call your wife. Have her bring Liam over. William looked at Kathy, who had been sitting still the whole time. The girl flinched as if coming out of a stupor and ran to the phone. Evelyn wanted to take advantage of the moment when the girl left the room and talk to her son. But when she looked at him and saw how much love and happiness was in his eyes, she didn't interfere. The woman decided that life would put everything in its place. And life did. Evelyn and Peter really fell in love with grandson Liam. Grandma Dasha looked at the boy and did not understand why he looked so much like little William. Exactly like William, not like his biological father. The fact that Bones' daddy was James, they never found out. William and Kathy didn't want to tell. They were fine as they were. James tried to communicate with his relatives as little as possible. He was afraid of losing everything if the truth came out. The man had achieved too much to lose everything because of what he said was a mistake. He loved money, he loved luxury. But if Emily found out about the affair and the baby, his father-in-law would strip him of everything he had. So for the sake of keeping the secret, he was ready to give up even the nearest and dearest people. Everyone was happy. Kathy was happy with William and Liam, who was surrounded by the care of not only mom and dad, but also grandparents. This was something the boy could never have dreamed of. And James was happy, surrounded by power and money, an unloved wife, and a father-in-law who was killing the man more and more. Everyone had something they aspired to. Well, who's right? Life will show. Subscribe and click the bell.
A slender girl whirled through the hospitable open doors. She skipped the greeting and announced her hostess, who was not inferior to her in terms of figure. Adriana, get dressed quickly. In half an hour we'll begin viewing, and we still have to get there. Hey, Kelly, what are you doing? What screening? Where are we going? The guest, almost jumping from impatience, she actively gestured, as if trying to give her friend the necessary acceleration, and snidely interrogated. What viewing? Couldn't you ask anything smarter? Well, not cooking, dancing, of course. Let's move, there's less and less time left. Why are you so slow today, and don't you look fresh? All the more reason to get a move on. express mask on your face or something." The hostess sighed and tried to explain the reason for her fatigue. Energetic Kelly and politely declined to participate in the viewing. "Sorry, I'd rather rest at home. Grandma's not feeling well. My blood pressure in the morning was off the charts by the time I got home. I even had to call an ambulance. Just the other day, the general practitioner came by and wrote a bunch of tests that need to be taken. Tomorrow I'll call a field lab for Grandma so she doesn't have to go to the clinic. So Kelly, let me wish you luck, and I'll keep my fingers crossed for you." The guest twisted at the temple, showing that she thinks about her interlocutor. "Are you trying to set me up, Adriana? I sent a video of our doubles performance to the preliminaries. After I got the message that I liked the dance, I submitted an official application to participate in the section of dance duets. A dude is 2 people. If I suddenly appear on stage alone, then maybe my number the jury will not even look at. Urgently looking for a partner is also a doubtful event." Adriana did not restrain her indignation and asked her friend directly, "Shouldn't you have asked me if I want to perform and fight with competitors for unknown reasons?" Seeing that Adriana was not giving in to flattery, Kelly changed her tone to a belittling one. "Adriana, please, please, please. I don't ask you to do anything that often. You are our crowning program. Even if I wake you up in the middle of the night, you will do it perfectly. You and I are a perfect team. I can't find such a talented partner, even if I search for several years, especially since we have a little over 2 o'clock before the screening starts." An older woman came out of the room and said hello to the guest. "Kelly, good afternoon." "Hello, Miranda." Adriana perked up. "Grandma, what's wrong? Are you not feeling well?" The woman shook her head. "I'm fine, Adriana. You've heard the doctor say that you should move around a little if your blood pressure is more or less within normal limits. I've just measured 130/95. It'll come down a bit, and you can go into space. I'll go to the kitchen and make some tea." The guest decided to influence her friend's grandmother and spoke. "Miranda, how are you feeling? Maybe I can get some medicine while Adriana is getting ready?" The woman smiled. "Oh, Kelly, you were a foxy little fox, and you're still a foxy little fox. You don't need to go anywhere to get medicine. I've got everything I need. I'm sorry, girls, but I overheard bits of your conversation, but I wasn't listening. So why don't you tell me where you need Adriana to go so urgently?" Kelly's voice sounded pitiful, almost tearful. "To watch the dance competition, Miranda. It's practically a matter of life and death for me, and Adriana refuses." The woman looked carefully at Kelly, who folded her arms in a belittling gesture, shifted her gaze to her granddaughter, and looked her in the eye and asked, "Sweetie, you should probably get some rest. I have tortured you with my old age illnesses. So girls, let's go and drink tea. I'm sure this won't be the last contest we'll have." Kelly knew it was useless to argue with her grandmother. The girl obediently dropped her shoes and headed to the bathroom to wash her hands. However, knocking in the palms of her hands fragrant foam, the girl did not stop thinking of arguments that would help to force her friend to keep her company at the contest. 6-year-old Michael was looking after his younger brother and sister. Surprised, he looked up at her. "Mom?" he asked in an unusually serious tone for his age. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, son. Everything is fine." Kathy belatedly, realizing her mistake, tried to inconspicuously wipe away her tears. The boy looked at her carefully, then shifted his gaze to the younger children and nodded slowly. Obviously, he decided that his mother didn't want to disturb the little ones, and that was why he was trying to pretend that everything was fine. Kathy didn't try to dissuade him, but just quietly left the room, closing the door behind her. She hoped that the next day, Michael would have more important things to do and would not remember the incident. The woman had no idea where to go with her grief. There were only 2 rooms in their apartment, a child's room and an adult's room. And the second room was where her husband could come at any moment. Kathy didn't want to see him now. Besides, she suspected that he would not give up his favorite subject so easily and would continue to annoy her with his remarks. There was only one way out, despite the lateness of the hour, and that was to leave the apartment. Of course, leaving the children virtually alone was not the best solution. On the other hand, in such a state, she obviously will not be able to interact with them normally. And therefore, whether she is in the apartment or not does not play a special role. The younger ones would still be left in Michael's care. At least Kathy had no doubt that he would put them to bed properly and go to bed on time. Her son was responsible beyond his years, loved to mess around with his brother and sister. Of course, the woman tried not to let the children be alone for long periods of time. But when Michael took to tutoring the younger ones in her presence, she could see that he was doing a great job with them. Yes, she was lucky to have a son, and at the moment that was her only consolation. She walked aimlessly down the street, hardly looking around, not even noticing the beginning of the rain, small and nasty. All her thoughts were centered on one single question: how she had come to such a life. How had her happy youthful love ended when her husband openly accused her of infidelity without any reason? Kathy remembered how they had met. She is a young economics student at one of the country's leading universities. He was a promising young entrepreneur. Together they seemed to others, and to themselves, to be a perfect couple. Their relationship developed like in some romantic fairy tale. Courtship, gifts, restaurants, huge gorgeous bouquets of flowers. Both of them had a great future ahead of them, and hardly anyone could imagine the poverty and doom in which these people found themselves now. And this fall began, perhaps, at the very moment when Benjamin began to persistently persuade his future wife to leave the institute. Why would you do that? He said, "My income is enough for 2. You will stay at home, cook, clean, bring up children after all." At first, Kathy flatly refused to even hear about it. Raised in an orphanage, who had every chance to be at the bottom of life, she, by incredible diligence and by some miracle, managed to get into decent society. And now she clung to that opportunity with all her might. However, in the end, Benjamin managed to convince the girl that now this wonderful new world, in any case, will not go anywhere from her. And at first, everything was really good. Kathy, as Benjamin had planned, was setting up a household in the common house while he was doing his business. They had enough money, even with a surplus. Nevertheless, somehow it didn't work out. There were always some not obligatory, but pleasant things that I wanted to buy right now, and perhaps none of them at that time thought about the need for any savings. My parents would help us in case of emergency, Benjamin assured his young wife. When she timidly started talking about it, "You know they're not poor," Kathy still didn't know. He himself at that time believed what he was saying or was deceiving her, confident that that very critical situation would never happen. Now, the day of the contest came very quickly. There was literally no empty space in the hall. After all, to be honest, there was not much entertainment in the camp. According to the draw, Adriana was chosen to perform right after the magician, who opened the talent parade. Going on stage, the girl brilliantly began her performance with a familiar song. However, when the first lines of the second verse were heard from the speakers, the music stopped. There was silence in the hall. Only the girl on the stage acted as if nothing had happened and continued her dance. She managed to look into the hall as before. so it seemed that she looked into the soul of every spectator. Adriana's lips were moving slightly. Apparently, she did not hum the song loudly after all, helping herself not to get lost in the dance. It was fantastically beautiful. The silence was suddenly broken by a lone voice from somewhere from the last rows, singing the popular lines aloud. Then other spectators joined the unknown soloist. Soon almost the entire hall, including not only teenagers but also a large part of the staff, was singing the familiar lines. One of the contestants, who was standing with a guitar backstage waiting for his exit, began to play the melody on the instrument. As she spoke, Adriana made several deep curtsies to each side of the room, as if there were important people there, as well as to her unintentional accompanist from backstage. Smiling, she sent air kisses to everyone, and at that moment the applause rang out. As a result, the first prize was awarded to Adriana. The silver prize winner was a young man who played guitar perfectly and won many hearts. The honorable third place went to Kelly. She didn't seem to be upset. She found the strength to congratulate those who had beaten her. Thanking the jury and the audience, that same night, after eliminations, Kelly went to Adriana's cabin and called her in to talk. The winner did not refuse. At Kelly's suggestion, they retreated to the dining room so that, she said, they could not be overheard by nosy neighbors, and sat down on a bench. The silence lingered, and Adriana asked, "What did you want? Speak quickly, because I'm tired. I'm falling off my feet." "Anyway, I just wanted to admire your performance. You were great, you were great. You handled an unconventional situation very well. You didn't get confused and danced everything without a hitch." Adriana was pleased with the praise from a peer who knew about dancing, and she confessed, "In general, this merit is not entirely mine. Our coach once told us that at any level of competition we should be ready for anything." She gave an example of how once at the World Figure Skating Championships in the early 70s, one of the pairs performing was in a terrible situation. The musical accompaniment, while performing the program, simply turned off. However, the skaters, with a squeak, cutting the ice with their skates, continued to perform the elements as if nothing had happened. The secret was that they were practicing with a metronome at the insistence of their coach. The whole pattern of the dance, or I don't remember exactly how they call the sequence of elements, was subordinated to a strict rhythm, calculated by seconds, and the absence of music in the middle of the performance was not a disaster. It was certainly much more difficult for them than for me today. Can you imagine the difference in the scale of the competition? Plus, no one was singing along. I had that inspirational example in my mind today too, and their incredible support from the audience was palpable. Kelly was ecstatic. Challenging her rival to a meeting was originally just to find out her secret. Now she decided to become her friend. Adriana accepted the offer to socialize. They exchanged what they knew and even came up with a few dance routines. For the performance at the Parents' Day, the girls came up with a small number and thwarted a flurry of applause. Upon returning to the city, the girlfriends continued to socialize. Kelly even went to study in the studio, where Adriana practiced. As they grew up, slim, young, perfectly dancing beauties invariably attracted attention at discos. The girls together entered the Institute of Culture and managed to reach the equator. When the happy, quiet life of Adriana collapsed overnight, her parents died in the family car. As soon as they drove a little away from the parking lot at the mall, the car flew into the air. Doctors were powerless to do anything. The girl was saved only by the fact that she did not feel very well that day and stayed at home. She didn't go shopping with her parents. She lay on the sofa under a warm woolen blanket and drank tea with lemon, trying to overcome her ailments as soon as possible. When Adriana saw her grandmother opening the door of her dead daughter's apartment with her own key, she realized that something irreparable had happened. Miranda hugged her granddaughter and whispered the sad news in her ear. The girl couldn't find her place. It seemed to her that if she had gone with her parents, she would have surely noticed something wrong and prevented the death of her loved ones. She tried not to upset her grandmother, but at times tears dripped from her eyes when something reminded her of her parents. Kelly became a real support for Adriana during that terrible period. She literally moved into Miranda's apartment, where a friend moved after the tragedy. Kelly did not let her grief wither her. She, almost by force, took her to the institute, forced at least something to eat. To the surprise of many neighbors and other people's gossip, the perpetrator involved in the massacre of Adriana's parents managed to detain. And the main merit belonged not to the law enforcement agencies, which, as if someone gave the order, not too active in the search for the criminal. Grandmother spared no money to punish not only the murderer, but also the customer of the massacre of the only adored daughter and son-in-law whom she respected and loved. Miranda sold her jewelry and carefully shielded her granddaughter from the details of the investigation and court cases. She seriously feared for Adriana. After all, her psychological state, even 6 months after the tragedy, was deplorable. As soon as the girl approached the house where the apartment was located, where she lived with her parents, as she began to have hysterics. Adriana could not forgive herself for staying alive. To return to the place where she was once happy, the girl refused flatly. Miranda didn't insist. It wasn't easy for her, and alone, she would probably have lost her mind. Her granddaughter and the punishment of criminals were her anchors to keep her sane. Adriana was holding on in part because of her grandmother, and not without Kelly's help, trying to continue living in her new reality. Her financial situation had taken a noticeable hit, and Miranda, after much deliberation, arranged a home council with her granddaughter. "Girl, I realize that we are going to have a difficult conversation, but I will not make important decisions without you. I know that the apartments are not thrown away, but to rent it to me, frankly sorry. I'm afraid that instead of money, we'll end up with ruin. What do you think?" "Grandma, you're right. It's too hard for me to be there. I couldn't find a normal job yet, and I'm ashamed to sit on your neck." The woman hugged her granddaughter tightly, glad that she did not cry during the short but emotionally heavy conversation, and began to help with the sale of her daughter's apartment. Throughout the tragic, difficult days, as the woman motored around town trying to get justice and dealing with other issues, Kelly supported her friend. She even tried to drag Adriana out to all sorts of recreational activities. It was to no avail. However, Adriana knew that Kelly had met some guy at one of the discos where she couldn't get her out, and now, making sure that her friend was in a relatively normal state, she spent all her free time with him. Adriana had a slip of resentment that it was as if Kelly was hiding her suitor from her, but she realized it all after another serious conversation with her grandmother. Once Miranda, who had aged dramatically after the tragic events, seeing her granddaughter looking sad over her notes, sat down opposite her and, looking into her eyes, spoke. "My girl, I know that you had to grow up very suddenly, but that's the way fate has it. Anyway, that's not what I wanted to tell you now. It's inevitable that you and Kelly are seeing less of each other. It was bound to happen one day. You can't be around her everywhere, or it's abnormal. You shouldn't be offended that she doesn't introduce you to her boyfriend. It's just quite easily explained. The way the world works is that love is always prioritized over friendship." Adriana objected indignantly. "I'm not going to steal Kelly's boyfriend." Grandmother smiled. "I didn't think so." Kelly probably doesn't suspect you of evil intentions either. But instinctively she's trying to spend more time with her boyfriend and keep you out of his meetings so that his attention isn't dissipated. Men are a windy people. Not all of them, of course, but alas, a great many. So I don't want you to take offense or be too trusting. I didn't tell you, but you have a right to know. Your parents, as it turns out, were massacred by people they considered good friends. Just remember that you can only trust yourself completely, unconditionally, and fully. Be especially careful when you fall in love. Happiness loves silence. The less we brag, the better. Adriana nodded, listening to her grandmother. Everything was falling into place. The resentment against her friend was evaporating like raindrops from hot asphalt. Adriana really carefully memorized all the words of the only native person. The girl had always admired her grandmother, and now she was a little ashamed that she had left her favorite relative unattended. Of course now, having almost reached the desired stop, it was silly to go back. All that remained was to perfectly fulfill her friend's request and get home faster. Scraps of triumphant, sad, and instructive memories managed to rush through Adriana's mind as they drove to the casting. Even before arriving at the venue, the girl's thoughts were interrupted by Kelly's enthusiastic monologue, anticipating success. Very soon we will get our diploma, and then hello, a new life. Paris will have better prospects than our backwoods town. Adriana thought she was used to her best friend's ambition and spontaneous actions. But Kelly still managed to surprise her, and she objected, standing up for the good name of her hometown. Kelly, you've got a nerve, calling our town of over 1 million people a backwoods town. That doesn't seem right. Besides, how's your boyfriend gonna feel about it? Something happened that had never happened in our many years of friendship. Kelly was embarrassed to hear such a question and to avoid answering it. She abruptly turned the conversation to the details of the upcoming performance. As they approached the contest venue, Adriana's misgivings became more and more prevalent. Judging by the fact that the line to the old building of the once former movie theater was thinly snaking almost halfway down the long stop, two things were becoming apparent. First, the competition looks like it's going to be stiff. Second, the casting was not organized in the best way. However, after the girls had been standing for about an hour among the same, eager to become famous in the field of dance, the line suddenly began to move much faster. When Kelly and Adriana finally waited for the moment of their performance, the reason for this sudden acceleration became clear. And barely they had time to perform a couple of movements as the person sitting in the center of the table in the jury shouted, "Well done, just bravo." "Enough. Wait, in the next room." We need to discuss the concept of further development of the duo. There's water, tea, healthy sweets, have a rest. A little later, you'll be invited for an interview. Adriana didn't care because she had agreed only to participate in the very initial stage at the insistence of her stubborn friend. But Kelly's hands were almost trembling. She was afraid to hear that the project did not need a dance duet. Adriana, sensing Kelly's excitement, whispered softly, "I think I've accomplished my mission. Now I can say that I refuse from further participation in the competition. Not to take the place of the girls who dream of getting into the project." Kelly's heart was relieved, and she entered the improvised waiting room with a great mood, provided by the support of her best friend. Before, when the building had been a movie theater, as it had been planned when it was built, it had been a cafe. So the atmosphere was nervous. A pretty middle-aged brown woman, who supervised the distribution of food and kept order, smiled sweetly at the contestants, poured tea and water. She offered candy and something similar to homemade marshmallows. Adriana refused the treat, but Kelly, having politely thanked Evelyn, as it was written on her badge, enjoyed the sweets and tea. Sipping her drink, she hissed to her friend, "What are you so shy about? This Evelyn is here for a reason, I think. She's probably watching and quietly observing which contestants have what kind of character, and whoever's going to be rude to her won't get any further than the qualifying round. Again, look how she looks at everyone carefully, especially if the girls are in a group. In dance groups, you know, like in astronauts, psychological compatibility is important. So she's noticing which group is more promising to form." Adriana marveled. "But you, Kelly, you're a consummate strategist." The girlfriend smiled. I am. I just can't imagine how much I want to get out of here and go to Paris. My parents are always nagging me. Study better, don't stay out late, eat well, or you're almost transparent," she mocked. Adriana kept silent so as not to cry. She was glad to have her mom and dad telling her what to do, and she desperately missed the times when the whole family was together. Fortunately, Adriana's painful conversation was interrupted. An acquaintance from the dance studio came over, and they chatted for a while, reminiscing about the past. The conversation helped to forget a little about the tense situation. The number of contestants in the hall did not decrease, and those who went to the room for the interview were replaced by new ones. Soon, Kelly and Adriana, an old friend of Kelly and Adriana's, were called in for an interview. And next the two of them were called into the room. In the room, sprawled on the couch, half lying, half sitting, was a man who from the first moment made the most unpleasant impression on Adriana. Mannerly from high, though looking at the girls from bottom to top, he, slightly stretching vowels, said, "I am the producer of this project. My name is Michael. I have to admit, honestly, I've been watching you move on the online camera, and it's impressive. You have a great duet, such cohesion, such harmony, and such plasticity. It's like you're moving without tension. I can see that you enjoy your performance, and that's very much appreciated. Anyway, I'm ready to make you a unique offer right now. I'll hire you at a club in the capital. At first, of course, there will be a trial period, but all the tips are yours. You'll have to learn a little bit, of course. We have our own specifics in this establishment, but I think you girls are talented, capable, and will easily cope." Adriana could not contain her surprise. What kind of tips can the members of a dance group have? Kelly, who already had a picture in front of her eyes of being applauded by a huge hall in the capital, suddenly also thought about her friend's quite adequate question. Michael laughed mannerly and explained, emphasizing the age of the contestants. "It seems that minors were not allowed to our casting. So where did this naivety come from all of a sudden, or did you decide to break comedy here? Why are you batting your eyelashes? You'll have to dance in a club where the customers are generous and hot. The producer didn't name the job, which she probably was, but Adriana realized she had to get out of that room as quickly as possible. Taking Kelly under her arm, the girl correctly said goodbye. "I'm sorry to have taken up your time, but we have to go." Contrary to fears, not Michael, no one or anyone else was holding the girls back. They quietly walked out of the former movie theater building into the street. The always cheerful Kelly shrank, realizing that she had almost got into a bad story, and Adriana cheered her up. "Don't worry, there'll be more normal auditions. In the meantime, let's get a cab. I'm really worried about Grandma." Kelly, who was feeling awkward, was uncomfortable to refuse, even though she had planned to give herself an extraordinary shopping spree to improve her mood. While the girls were in the cab, Adriana asked, "Kelly, let's not scare my grandmother with the truth about this fake casting. Let's just say it didn't work out. I mean, it's real, and she doesn't need to know the details. Of course, immediately agreed friend. I myself do not like to think that I was so easily fooled. You could have checked out the organizer's firm. Okay, I'll be smarter now. Thank you, Adriana, for coming with me. Adriana smiled at her friend, even though she was feeling a little sick to her stomach. She had left her grandmother alone for the sake of this cheating contest, and she would never forgive herself if something bad happened during that time. To the girl's great relief, everything was relatively fine with Miranda. However, the woman promised her granddaughter that she would soon undergo a full examination. Do not worry, I will pass all the doctors. In the polyclinic at the place of residence, the queue to the cardiologist was scheduled for 3 months in advance. The neurologist was on vacation. There was no endocrinologist at all. In fact, only the therapist, ENT, ophthalmologist, and gynecologist worked. Adriana smiled sadly, remembering Kelly's speech about her hometown, and mentally agreed with her. A polyclinic in the center of town with no doctors almost. At the insistence of her granddaughter, who was worried about her health, Miranda had gone to a private pay clinic. Adriana was adamant. Let's withdraw the money left from the sale of the apartment, but you will pass the doctors without such a long wait? The woman only had to obey, and her epic with visiting the clinic, taking tests, and undergoing examinations began. Adriana, of course, asked her grandmother about the results, but in the hustle and bustle before graduation, she simply did not have time to study what was stated in the statements. Miranda cheerfully told her granddaughter that all the detected deviations from the norm were just senile changes, which angered Adriana. Nonsense, you're always young. In fact, Miranda's health was not as rosy as she presented it to her granddaughter. In addition to her diagnosed diabetes mellitus, the cardiologist was concerned about her heart condition. The shallow woman didn't panic and checked the diagnosis elsewhere, then at another clinic. But all the doctors were unanimous. The condition was dangerous and surgery had to be prepared. Miranda diligently followed all the recommendations, and Adriana was happy to note that the feverish blush had disappeared from her grandmother's cheeks. The woman underwent the operation, and it seemed that a new happy period of life was ahead of her. After receiving their diplomas, Adriana and Kelly decided to open their own dance studio, where not only children, but also adults who decided to join dancing could come. The girls staked on an unusual approach. They offered visitors a mix of modern dances, as well as engaged in staging movements of couples to wedding compositions, using an idea from a movie once seen. In addition, Adriana decided that her free time would be spent sewing, learning from her grandmother. And because from the very beginning to promote the studio is not the fastest thing, and an extra penny saved or earned will not hurt. Surprisingly, needlework fascinated the girl, helping to distract from the troubles, especially since Miranda was a patient and knowledgeable teacher and was happy to share with her granddaughter all the wisdom of which she knew a lot. After only a few months, justifying the most daring hopes of the owners, the studio became a success. Of course, the net profit was still out of the question. But still, the idea was a success. Adriana was happy that she was doing what she loved, both at home and in the company of her best friend. Most of all warmed the soul of the girl thought that her grandmother now does not have to deal with the financing of their small family alone. Everything was fine for almost a whole year, and then Miranda was suddenly gone. The girl came home and saw her grandmother lying on the couch as if resting. She slowly approached to cover her with a plaid, because the apartment was quite cool, because the central heating had already been turned off and traditionally frost had returned. as soon as the girl came closer. A scream of horror burst out, it seemed, from the very depths of her soul. It was obvious that her grandmother would now no longer be saved from the cold. The excitement she had experienced had proved fatal to Miranda. In the turmoil of saying goodbye to her only relative, Adriana found her outlet in the studio. Dissolving in the movements and carefully watching the dancer, the girl drove away her pain. Kelly, who seemed to have everything fine, tried not to shine with happy eyes so as not to annoy her friend. She came to visit her less and less often. Adriana was not offended. Who would want to communicate with a sad person? She was disgusted with herself. For a long time going over a piece of cloth which her grandmother had accumulated quite a lot. It was as if the girl was having a conversation with her favorite relative Adriana. It seemed that only in this way she would be able, if not to forget about the hardtack, then at least to reduce it. One evening, having lost track of time, the girl completely forgot about the rules of safety. When she heard the doorbell ring, for some reason she immediately decided that Kelly, whom she hadn't even seen today, had come to see her. Her friend had warned her that she couldn't make the class because of personal matters and had probably dropped by to tell her something. Eventually, Adriana opened the door without looking through the peephole and was surprised to see an unfamiliar young man with a box of cake in his hands on the doorstep. The girl muttered, "You must be mistaken," and began to close the door. However, the man did not allow her to do so and surprised her with an unexpected revelation. "Hello, Adriana, how mature you are. I see you don't recognize me." "Well, I'm not proud. I'll introduce myself. My name is Benjamin. I'm your own grandfather." The girl grinned wickedly, remembering what her mother had told her. "Well, he's more like family. He left Grandma when your daughter went to school, and as far as I know from my mom, he only visited a couple times. So Benjamin, have a nice day and goodbye." The man put his foot on the threshold so that Adriana couldn't slam the door in his face as she intended, even if she wanted to. And in a stern tone that sent shivers down the girl's spine, he said, "You granddaughter do not get hot. The apartment partly belongs to me." I never divorced Miranda. She probably didn't bother with that formality. She didn't file for alimony. So, dear granddaughter, excuse me, move over and let me pass. Stunned Adriana, using all her strength, managed to put on the door chain and shouted to the uninvited guest, "I'm going to call the police now." "Just so you know." The man only smirked. "Call all you want. It's even better that you make sure I'm telling the truth. I'll treat them to cake. I'll tell them that my granddaughter is the only one who won't let me in. I have a specialty cake from my childhood town. I'm sure the cops will love it. I'm just afraid it'll frost a little, so you better hurry them up. Tell them it's urgent. Grandpa wants to treat you. Go ahead, I'll wait for you here." The man took his foot off. Adriana slammed the door shut, locked it, and froze in doubt. Really, she would call the police now, and what would they say? "Come, because there is a relative unknown to me under my door. He does not threaten, does not attack." Thinking, the girl moved away from the door just in case and dialed her friend's number. Briefly explaining the situation to Kelly, Adriana asked, "Help me out. Your cousin seems to know someone in the police force. Ask him, if it's not too much trouble, what should I do?" "I got it. Don't worry. Give me 10 minutes and wait for my call." Kelly called her excited friend back, even a little before the announced deadline, and happily informed her, "Wait, we'll be there soon, me and backup. You will open the door only after I tell you to, understand?" Adriana gave a sigh of relief. "Thank you, Kelly. I owe you one." The girl tiptoed towards the door to see what was going to happen, and soon she heard the low voices of men. It was hard to make out who was talking about what, and Adriana was cursing herself for insisting on good noise insulation during the renovation. However, she didn't have to suffer for long. There was a knock at the door, and Kelly, parodying a cartoon character, said, "Owl, open up. The bear is here." Then she added in her own voice, "It's okay." Adriana let in her friend, her cousin Kevin, who she knew a little, her grandfather, who had shown up out of nowhere, and a strange man. Kelly introduced him. "Adriana, this is Christopher. He's one of the best lawyers around. He will help you resolve the matter with the least amount of effort." The man bowed his head and spoke in a pleasant baritone. "Although under such unexpected circumstances, it's a pleasure to meet you. If you don't mind, why don't we all sit down at the table? Benjamin will calmly state the essence of his claims, present the documents he has. If it's not too much trouble, Adriana, I'll ask you to prepare the receipts for the rent for the last month or any other month. It's not too important." The lawyer's voice mesmerized the girl. She was even glad of her grandfather's sudden intrusion because this mishap had led to a pleasant acquaintance. While Adriana went to the other room to get a receipt, Christopher had time to study the passport that the girl's grandfather had given him. He held it out to Kevin. "Look with your own eye. Something marriage stamp looks strange to me." Kelly's cousin, having scrutinized the stamp, began to photograph all the pages of the passport. Benjamin raised an eyebrow in surprise, but did not have time to comment. The lawyer asked him an unexpected question. "What store did you buy the cake from?" The man even stood up, saying, "You can't buy such a thing here. In my hometown, the only bakery in my hometown bakes according to old recipes. I went in yesterday before I left and bought some." Christopher nodded in affirmation. "It seems we are fellow countrymen, Benjamin. Only I haven't been to my native land for about 5 years. Who's behind the cash register at the pastry shop? Same Aunt Camille?" With her eyelashes glued shut and her constant joke in response to complaints about the disorder on the counters, Benjamin nodded. "She is." The lawyer rejoiced as if he had been told the most joyous news. "We must go and see how the deceased woman trades. Yes, jokes about jokes. Tell you what, Benjamin, or whatever your name is, Aunt Camille's been in the ground for 15 years. I doubt you're related to Adriana. Even if you were, according to the receipts she's kindly provided for the last 6 months, you're not even registered here. You have no right to this property, and if you think to sue, only wasting time and money. So my advice to you is to get out of here and don't let Adriana see you again. Otherwise, don't even doubt, I will find an article that will bring you to administrative or even criminal responsibility." The elderly man, upset, grabbed his document with surprising impudence and went to the exit. Adriana shouted after him, "Take the cake back. I don't want anything from you." Benjamin did not resist or refuse and left the apartment, which he had not managed to become a full-fledged tenant. Adriana was overjoyed and agreed to let her rescuers go only after an impromptu feast. She sincerely thanked her friend, her cousin and the lawyer who had so masterfully saved her the trouble, and asked a direct question. "Christopher, please name your fee." The man laughed. "Better just by name. I'm maybe 7 years older, and when people address me by you, I feel like an old man, and I think I've already paid for everything with my home-cooked food and this funny business." Kelly picked up the lawyer's laughter, laughing at the hapless imposter. "Nice work, Christopher. You got him. Kevin, what did you take passport photos of this scammer for?" A cousin confessed. "Honestly, it was just to be on the level. I thought I'd scare him with it, and I think it worked." When the guests left, Adriana did not think that the strange incident would have a pleasant continuation. However, the next day Christopher came to her in the morning, brought coffee and a cake from a rather status coffee shop, explaining, "This is as a sign of apology for the fact that yesterday the cake could not be tasted." The girl thanked the lawyer and, feeling a little awkward, offered to have breakfast together. During the conversation at the table, Adriana had the feeling that she had known Christopher all her life and that he understood her from half a word. They even had the same musical tastes, which was not the case even with Kelly, who couldn't stand rock or classical music. Adriana was not even surprised that communication with Christopher had become a necessity for her, a real addiction. Once during another date, the man reluctantly, as if embarrassed, shared with the girl a difficult story of his life. He said that he was married, and after the divorce moved from his hometown to the metropolis where he once studied. "That's how I lived until I met you," worked, rented an apartment near the office, and never thought that I would ever fall in love so much. Adriana's heart melted from the tenderness of Christopher, with whom she felt like behind a stone wall. The girl once offered her favorite man to move in with her, and he agreed, and in confirmation of the seriousness of his intentions, gave a thin ring as an engagement ring and proposed to get married closer to summer. Can you imagine what a beautiful ceremony could be organized? No, winter has its charms too, but it's impossible to organize an extravagant photo shoot in nature. And I want you to remember our wedding day forever. With Kelly, Adriana now saw her almost exclusively at work. One day, entering the tiny office, which they proudly called the coach's room, she found her best friend in tears. "What happened? Did you get hurt? Should I call a cab to the hospital?" Kelly shook her head. "I'm just sad. No one wants me." Adriana marveled. "Come on, I need you." "Don't worry, you have practice in an hour. Everyone will be waiting for you there. Don't be sad." Kelly cried, "You don't even have time to hang out with me now. I have no one to go dancing with, no one to hang out with. I'm so lonely." Adriana tactfully did not ask where the mysterious bow had gone, from which her friend's eyes shone so brightly, and offered her, "You know, let's sit at my place tonight. Christopher said he's gonna be working late. He has to go somewhere. You and me, we'll relax. We'll set up a beauty parlor at home, some masks, peels." The girls were in the middle of a merry conversation when Christopher returned to the apartment. He said hello to Kelly, kissed Adriana, and after thinking about it, invited the girls to an Italian cafe. Since that evening, the man also began to take an active part in making sure that the friend of his beloved did not feel neglected and lonely. On weekends, the groom took the bride and her friend to a country park hotel for a picnic with kebabs, or he rented a cottage at a camp where they could go skiing and snowboarding. Adriana was genuinely glad that her friend had stopped shedding tears. In addition, in business things also went afill. The girls even opened a branch of the studio without hesitation, entrusting all the paperwork to Christopher. Adriana, dreaming that soon her favorite will take her to apply. In advance, she found out the schedule of the wedding building, all the formalities, details, and waited for the fateful day to come. However, the man was alert, affectionate, but although the last spring month has already passed the middle, he did not talk about formalizing the relationship. Probably, Adriana for some time would go, as they say, in rose-colored glasses, and did not suspect anything. But one day, during a joint dinner, she had to leave the company of her fiancé and best friend to talk on the phone with the mother of one of the girls engaged in the studio. Returning to the table, Adriana almost caused a scandal when she saw Kelly move to her rightful place, kissing Christopher. The deluded bride had to summon all her self-control to almost calmly report, "So, Christopher, as far as I'm concerned, you're moving in. So give me your set of keys. I'll put your stuff together and let you know when you can pick it up." "Kelly, I want my apartment keys back too." However, the friend was not embarrassed and, rummaging through her purse in a completely calm tone, reported, "Anyway, I'm glad it's all finally cleared up. Yes, Christopher and I are together now. But let's not make a tragedy out of it, okay? I don't want our business to suffer because of any resentment you might have. Be professional, Adriana. I know it's going to be hard for you to see me, so I suggest we stay away from each other temporarily until you cool off. I'm afraid you'll suddenly have steam coming out of your ears." Kelly smiled victoriously, pulling a bunch of keys out of her bag and taking the keys to the apartment off her carabiner. She continued to outline her ideas. "We'll divide the studios like this. The one closer to my house will be on me. You can safely conduct training in the branch. You'll pay the minimum rent, and you can keep half of the profits you make. The rest will be saved up in accounts for future development. I think that's reasonable and fair." Adriana was surprised. "Wait, Kelly, are you kidding me? Why should I have to pay rent and profit? I'm just as much an owner as you are." Christopher tried to calm the girl, who had just not only abandoned, but thanks to her gullibility, deprived of a very significant part of the income. "Don't scandalize. People are already looking at us. Kitten, you gotta understand, it happens. Don't blame yourself. You're a wonderful person, a talented and beautiful girl. You'll be fine. Let's be friends, okay?" Kelly agreed with the man. "Yes, Adriana, let's civilize our relationship under new circumstances. I think you're being overdramatic. Of course, as a dance coach, you're unrivaled, but in business, I'm sorry, you don't know anything. Who signs papers like general powers of attorney and amendments to bylaws without looking? Christopher and I will be running the business. You do what you do best. Show me how to dance." Adriana remembered that she had actually signed a few sheets of paper without even reading, believing only Christopher's oral retelling, and flared up. "So, having actually knocked the ground out from under my feet, having taken away the joy of doing what I love, you're trying to look like a benefactor. Oh, good for you. But you should know that I will not give up. I will study all the documentation very carefully and will not let you wipe your feet on me." Grabbing her purse, Adriana ran home, not looking back at the calls to stop that the traders shouted after her. In the apartment, she ran from room to room, from bathroom to kitchen, grabbed the Christopher things she saw, and threw them on the bed. Then she tied the corners of the bedspread crosswise and hauled the unexpectedly heavy knot to the door to toss it over the threshold. As soon as her ex-fiancé arrived, finished with clearing the apartment of Christopher, Adriana rushed through every piece of paperwork she had at home. The more the deceived girl was immersed in reading, if necessary checking the meaning of terms on the internet, the more she was horrified. How naive she had been, how insanely gullible. How right her grandmother had been in saying that you can't trust anyone unconditionally. Such a blow from Kelly, whom she considered her best friend and fiancé. The girl could not imagine, even in the most nightmarish dream, the power of attorney that Adriana had given Christopher had played a very bad joke. The man, using her boundless trust, legally arranged everything so that the girl, in fact, almost no rights to the studio remained. She was now not the owner, but an ordinary employee, and could not even arrange a vacation or set a convenient work schedule without agreement with Kelly. Adriana, of course, could quit even now, but decided to try to work at least a month to prepare the way out, to rent the premises and organize there a new studio, luring the maximum number of clients. Adriana didn't even talk to Christopher, who had come to pick up her things, and as soon as the bundle with his belongings was on the landing, she hurried to close the door. In the adored studio, Adriana now went as a hard labor. And after a week, the flow of clients noticeably decreased. Even regular students and pupils began to refuse from classes. Adriana blamed herself, thinking that the trainings lacked courage and the spark that ignites talent in people who are shy to dance. But one day, one of the first visitors who became a regular opened her eyes to what was going on. It turned out that Kelly brazenly simply lures customers to her hall, not bending any methods. The most harmless lie of her former friend was the allegedly random news that Adriana was going to leave, and therefore she, of course, did not have time for classes. Thanking for the valuable information, the girl said goodbye to the visitors and went to the coach room on unbendable legs. She wanted to take her things quickly and, having reached home, to cheer herself up. However, she decided first of all to write to her former friend that she was quitting, and she immediately fulfilled her intention. The reply message that arrived in the messenger on her phone completely knocked Adriana out of her rut. The picture was a decorated vignette, an invitation to the wedding of Kelly and Christopher, and with a mocking column +1. Before the girl could catch her breath, another message arrived. We really want you not to be mad at us and to share our moment of joy. The uniforms are dressy. Kelly and Christopher. Adriana was in shock. What had she done to humiliate her like this? Why were the people she considered her support now pushing her into the abyss of despair? Had she misjudged them so deeply? The girl did not know what to do, but clearly understood that in such a state alone in any case cannot stay. It is necessary to be somewhere in the middle of people, so that the sinful thought of the most terrible way of solving problems does not get into her head. The girl went to the nearest park. There are a lot of people there, and at the same time no one invades personal space. If Adriana's state of mind could influence nature, the leaden gray sky would be pierced by lightning. People who were going to hide from the weather would have been slapped in the face by prickly rain. Wind gusts would have torn off the roofs of street cabs. Except that everything was almost exactly the opposite. The mood of one poor humiliated girl changed nothing. The sun was shining brightly in the sky, the young greenery on the trees gave a pleasant open-work shade, and the park looked excellent. The unknown florist obviously tried to create a magnificent landscape, and he had done everything with a soul. The park was much cozier than Adriana remembered it, and she sat down on a bench to try to disconnect herself from all the excitement that had nearly brought her to the brink today. She felt like she was performing on stage, and once again the music disappeared. Only this time the girl had no idea what kind of dance she was doing, and in general, what kind of melody was playing. The only thing left to do was to freeze in confusion and desperately try to figure out what to do next. Right in front of the place where the girl had settled down, there was a late variety of proud tulips, which looked, if not the winners in life, then definitely the masters of the flower beds. I wish I had their self-confidence, Adriana thought. Her thoughts were suddenly interrupted by a man's voice. Hey, why are you crying? Adriana, who didn't notice she was crying, wasn't going to talk to anyone and didn't answer the curious stranger. He left, but soon returned and sat down next to the sad Adriana. The stranger had an ice cream cone and a fluffy cloud of cotton candy in each hand. The man began to patiently explain to stop the girl, who was about to jump up and run away from him. Don't be scared, Adriana, but it just so happens that I know you, even though we don't know each other. I work for a private investigator who was commissioned by your grandmother to work on solving your parents' elimination. Since we seriously feared that the villains would use any means to obstruct justice. So I was assigned by my boss to keep a discreet eye on you. So you could say that you have been my ward for several months. The girl took a closer look at the man. He might have glimpsed her once, but she couldn't be sure of that. The stranger, smiling, introduced himself. John, an employee of the secret private agency. After introductions, the man handed Adriana both a cone and cotton candy, explaining, "They said in the movies that ice cream seemed to make you feel more cheerful, but I thought it was unlikely you had a sore throat, so I got you some cotton candy. I, for one, love cotton candy." Adriana was in a foul mood, and she answered John not very kindly. "You can enjoy it. I try not to eat any of those types of sweets." The man smiled. "Well, no, so no. Really, I can't eat that much myself. Wait now, I'll treat those boys who are counting change at the kiosk, and I'll be back." I don't know why, but Adriana obeyed and waited for John. The assistant detective asked, "You can consider it a professional interest, and if you're uncomfortable, you don't have to answer, but I'll ask you why you're crying on such a beautiful day in this beautiful park." Adriana grinned and decided to share her distress. It might have been a lovely day if it hadn't been for one thing. "Today, 2 traitors have taken to inviting me to a wedding. My ex-fiancé is going. What was it called? To solemnize my marriage to my ex-best friend, and it's a mock invitation for 2 people. They know I don't have anyone to go with. They're mocking me." It was as if the man knew exactly the unmistakable path to her heart. He even used a perfume exactly the way she liked, with a top note, lemon, and a persistent trail of vetiver. Not an obvious choice for a serious, successful lawyer, as Christopher seemed to be. In addition, several times Adriana noticed that he contemptuously wrinkled his nose when she danced to the tune of his favorite band, although he claimed to adore their work. When asked why the man's grimaces flickered on his face, Adriana, as it seemed to Adriana at the time, answered about a sudden colic or a headache. Closely examining her memories of the recent past, the jilted bride discovered more and more oddities. Coming home, Adriana was already convinced that Christopher, having previously learned as much information about her as possible, did everything to gain her trust and settle in her apartment as a fiancé. Admittedly, he had succeeded with ease, but what was his goal? Adriana kept no cash in the apartment. A sewing machine, fabrics, leftovers from the family jewelry collection. That's all the valuables the girl had. Driven by an unaccountable fear, Adriana checked the stash. A pair of antique earrings and a ring were in place. The girl calmed down a little, but the next morning, taking the jewelry, went to the bank to put them in a safe deposit box. After all, she had no guarantee that Christopher had not acquired a duplicate key. Besides, Kelly could have done it too. After visiting the bank, the girl planned to call a locksmith to change the lock, just in case. So, after signing the safe deposit box agreement and placing the jewelry in it, she decided to withdraw the accumulated interest from the account in order to have cash on hand. However, an employee of the financial institution shocked Adriana with the news. "I'm sorry, but according to your power of attorney, all the funds were withdrawn from the account yesterday." Trying not to shout, Adriana clarified, "Can you tell me who I gave the power of attorney to? Can you look at it?" The employee did not refuse the strange client and gave a name that Adriana did not expect to hear. The money from the account was taken not by Christopher, as the girl supposed, but by her former best friend. Thanking the operator, who asked if everything was all right, Adriana went home. It was suddenly clear to her as daylight that it was Kelly who could so accurately orient Christopher about all her likes and dislikes. It wasn't enough that her best friend didn't know about Knave Adriana. It was at her behest and at her instigation that the man managed to appear in the image of an ideal. She believed in incredible harmony and love at first sight. Now there was a lot of explanation, and the fact that Kelly had pressed her pity, cursing her loneliness, was also part of the plan. Surely in inviting her to the wedding, the traitors must have been up to something devious too. Perhaps someone would be involved in the robbery of the apartment, while Adriana, swallowing tears, would say congratulations. After all, her friend knew for a fact that she still had her jewelry, only that she never told her where the stash was located in the house. Adriana did not go to the police about the theft of money. After all, Kelly technically had power of attorney, and there was no doubt that it was quite real signed. The master replaced the lock in the door, and the girl felt a little calmer. However, she couldn't relax completely. Deciding to take advantage of the insomnia for her own good, Adriana began to think about an outfit to make a spectacular appearance at the wedding of the people who had so despicably betrayed her trust. Barely waiting for working hours, the girl appeared in the office of the agency's secret. Following the clues, sitting near the turnstile guard, she found the door, on which hung a sign with the name of a recent acquaintance, and knocked and entered. Before John told the girl the information he had gotten, she confessed, "You know, I guess you were right. Christopher was instructed by my best friend. She took money out of my account by proxy, by the way. But it was my fault. I signed every piece of paper my fiancé gave me, my own fault." John confirmed it. "Yeah, I was able to talk to Kelly's cousin Kevin. He's probably the most innocent element in this scheme. In my opinion, he was used. He's a big guy, and his main task was to scare the guy who introduced himself as your grandfather." Catching the surprise on Adriana's face, John explained, "It was a well-thought-out production. Kelly, as I understand it, knew the basic information about your family. Christopher had found an actor to play Benjamin. You'd only seen your grandfather in old photographs when he was young, and there was no fear of exposure. The crooks wanted to get rich, and as I understand it, they almost succeeded. I think they didn't invite you to the wedding just to make fun of you, but with the same vested interest. You caught them unexpectedly, and he just didn't have time to bring the search of your apartment to its logical conclusion." Adriana nodded. "I've come to roughly the same conclusion. I just have a few questions bouncing around in my head. Why would my best friend, the one who'd been there for me in my most difficult moments, suddenly decide to betray me? Why would she treat me this way? It's not like we've never even had a serious fight." John speculated, maybe banal envy or greed. Those are usually the main motives behind most crimes. Adriana's face even stretched a little in surprise. "Originally, my family wasn't much richer than Kelly's, so it's definitely not greed. And as for envy, it wasn't her envy of me. It was my friend's envy from the moment my parents died that drove me crazy. Imagine Kelly being able to play checkers with her dad, hug her mom, and have secret chats with her. I was overcome with envy. What can I say? I still get that feeling now. Maybe she's getting back at me for being jealous. I don't think so. Anyway, I don't know what to think. I'm in a lot of pain right now with everything that's going on. One thing I know for sure, I will definitely go to the wedding to these traitors, if only to look at Christopher and Kelly to clarify why they did such a despicable thing to me." "The assistant detective," he explained. "Christopher's motives are pretty clear. He was driven by greed. He has so much debt in his hometown that he's got to call the shots. Lawyer, he is quite mediocre, but his habits are such that the average fees cannot provide. He had addictions too. He got out of town by swindling several ladies out of large sums of money. Ostensibly going to get married, took money under plausible pretexts and quarreled. He was treated in a private clinic in our city, giving doctors for his rehabilitation almost everything he had from knave girls was. Now you're back on the trail of the fortune hunter. Don't worry, we'll fight to get you back your dance studio and your money. But don't make a big deal out of it just yet. Christopher and Kelly might just run away, and I'd like to see them get a fair shake. Adriana began to thank the man. John sighed. I've been able to find so much information on Christopher these days, it's amazing. He seems to be far from stupid. In terms of all sorts of not quite honest methods, a real master, but apparently overconfident and too much. Do you want me to tell you right now all the machinations he's pulled off in our town? Or you'd better wait, and then you'll see everything at the wedding. Though Adriana wanted to know everything at once, she answered after a moment's thought. I think I'll wait. I don't want to get deeper into this mess right now. I've had enough of what I've learned so far. There's only 2 problems left. What to wear and who to go with. I'm working on the first one, but I don't know what to do about the second. John, why don't you keep me company? Don't think I'll pay for the escort, because it's a separate job. The man shook his head negatively. No, I'm not suitable for a spectacular appearance. My appearance is standard, unremarkable, to be honest. Well, you'll come with me on your arm and what? Your detractors will enjoy the first moment. They'll think something like, didn't you manage to persuade anyone better? If you're gonna take a swing at them, you gotta hit them hard enough to make their mood go away. Listen, I think I know just the guy for your date. If it works out, that'd be great. And if it doesn't, I'll keep you company, of course. It may not be the most stunning exit, but I'll give you some great information. Adriana agreed with John that they would meet half an hour before the time specified in the invitation to the wedding and agreed on the place. After saying goodbye, the girl went to the needlework store to buy accessories for the planned outfit. She had only 2 weeks left to create a stunning dress. Not the smallest amount of time, but the idea wasn't too simple either. Adriana was nervous and had stabbed her fingers with a needle several times, sweeping the details until they bled. In order not to cry from resentment and pain, the girl remembered her grandmother's words that the things sewn with such incidents will turn out perfectly. She didn't have to rush to work, and she missed her classes, but she wasn't going to bow to Kelly and ask to go back. Adriana was warmed by the thought that it was likely that the studio would soon be in her possession again, although her gullibility was already failing her. The girl trusted that John would be honest with her. On the day of Christopher and Kelly's wedding, Adriana looked truly dazzling. She looked like a flame of flame both in color and with muddy associations. The top of the dress was adorned with a bold, asymmetrical neckline. The skirt, with its high slits at the seams, swayed playfully as she walked, revealing nothing too much, but perfectly stirring her imagination. Adriana herself knew she was irresistible in this dress, but John's praise was gratifying to her. By his quite ordinary clothes, the girl realized that her companion would be someone else. And she was incredibly surprised when the man who had once tried to impersonate her grandfather approached her and the assistant detective. He embarrassingly introduced himself. James, an unemployed provincial theater actor. Well, necessity forced me to play the part of a confidence trickster. Pardon me for deceiving you, if you can. Adriana's heart was pounding as before an important performance, but she took James by the arm and walked with him to the restaurant rented by the traders. At the entrance, Kelly's parents suddenly met her and her companion, who greeted their daughter's friend very warmly and looked at her companion with undisguised interest. The bride's mother cordially invited, "Oh, Adriana, how glad I am that you have come. Come in there, almost everyone is already assembled. Have fun, relax, be happy for Kelly and her fiancé. Such a fine man. I hope you get lucky one day, you deserve it." Adriana was having a hard time with this conversation, and as if sensing this, her companion squeezed her hand a little harder. Kelly's father admired the way his daughter's friend looked, receiving as a reward a disgruntled look from his wife who dragged him along. "Have you forgotten? Where did the steward direct us? Come quickly, I'll see you, Adriana." Almost at a run, the woman dragged her husband along with her. When Adriana and James crossed the threshold of the banquet hall, the girl noted with satisfaction that Kelly and Christopher were frozen like statues when they saw the guests. The bride and groom did not look happy at all now. Somehow, having mastered their emotions, they waved to Adriana and her companion. Kelly reached for the groom's ear. She asked, "What's that alcoholic doing here? You said he'd get the money he was owed and go someplace where no one could find him." "Christopher, I'm scared. I'm afraid that Adriana has thought of some terrible revenge." Christopher hugged his fiancée, pressed her against him, and answered, "I don't think she's got anything serious on us. It's just a similar person." Adriana has a good visual memory, and she probably guessed that Grandpa didn't show up on her doorstep by accident, but that I would have gotten to her quickly and without suspicion. So she decided to annoy us. You might say, to poison the joy of our happy day. She thought about it, reconstructed what this supposed Benjamin looked like, and hired someone. There are plenty of actors in this country who dream of an easy way to make money. So relax, Kelly. Adriana and her companion tried to behave as if nothing had happened and not to stand out among the other guests, either by excessive joy or even more so by frowning. Thanks to the lady hostess, they found their table almost instantly and sat down quietly, waiting for the start of the party, which promised to be very unusual. Adriana was pleased to note how anxiously Kelly looked at her, and meeting her gaze, smiled as happily as possible. She had absolutely no idea what kind of surprise John had prepared, and was excited about the promised surprise. At the signal of the host, Kelly's parents brought a huge loaf into the banquet hall, and the fun began in full swing. Guests congratulated the newlyweds, who can do what they want. The bride's parents sang a duet song. The aunt on the groom's side organized a long presentation of small souvenirs to rhyming lines. Adriana was getting more and more anxious, but James reassured her. And when the hostess announced their turn to congratulate the newlyweds, the man whispered quietly, "Well, Adriana, here we go. Leave it to me to speak, and you listen. Be glad that in time about the real essence of the former fiancé learned." Coughing dramatically, Adriana's companion, carefully supporting her, took a seat in the middle of the hall. The experienced actor didn't even need a microphone. His well-practiced voice, surprisingly, without losing its sonority after years of libations, was heard in all corners of the hall. "So, ladies and gentlemen, madam and monsieur, I suggest we turn our attention to the screen." The hostess turned off several rows of lamps, and the room became much darker. Suddenly, to the sound of Mendelssohn's March, racy images showing the groom with other women began to appear on the screen. And James accompanied the changing images with brief information about the names of the groom's lovers. When he came to his senses, Christopher tried to shout out the unexpected guest and convince everyone else that the image on the screen was a photomontage. But a seed of doubt had been sown. Kelly, it seems, was completely unaware of such an amorous nature of her fiancé. And after the photo of Christopher in the company of Adriana flashed shots with herself. And then the unusual movie continued with the participation of other ladies. Kelly slapped her fiancé and started yelling at him, not embarrassed by those present. "Asshole, you told me we'd cheat on my Adriana and live happily ever after. You got me to help you take the dance studio away from her. And you're telling me you were only seeing me for profit. Why didn't I think to follow you? You decided to get married. Then what were your plans? To run away with the money you gave me and take over my business? I hate you." Finally, the demonstration of the unfaithful Christopher on the screen came to an end. The lights came on and John entered the hall accompanied by police officers, explaining, "Unfortunately, the festivities will have to come to an end. The main culprits of the celebration are suspected of fraud." Kelly's parents rushed to the law enforcement officers to explain that there had been a mistake, but the police were adamant. Christopher and Kelly were handcuffed and led to the exit. As the ex-girlfriend approached Adriana, the girl asked the question that had been on her mind. "Why did you do this to me? I always thought you were someone I could trust." Kelly groaned and said, "You always got everything without a problem. First places, inheritance, even the students are drawn to you, not me." Adriana was shocked. She tried to figure out if Kelly was being sincere. Had she almost ruined her life really because of jealousy, as John had suggested? Kelly spat angrily and confessed, "You've always been the best, ever since sports camp, and I've been a pale semblance of you. You know what I'm gonna tell you? I hate you. Ever since I saw you dancing. If you must know, I'm the one who tried to ruin your performance. I'm the reason the music stopped playing during your dance, but it all turned out to your advantage." Kelly paid no attention to anyone around her and looking into Adriana's eyes informed, "The only times I've ever been really happy. Do you know which ones?" Adriana remained silent, afraid to even speculate, and Kelly grinned crookedly and continued, "I was ready to jump for joy when you were suffering. Oh, it wasn't easy to hide my joy, to act sympathetic." Kelly tried to throw herself at Adriana, but it was not easy to do it in handcuffs. The police officers led the detainee away. Adriana remained standing in the middle of the hall. She had yet to face her ex-fiancé, but he passed by with a glance at her neckline. Adriana asked after him, "Christopher, aren't you ashamed?" But the man didn't even turn around. John, who approached Adriana, said softly, "Such people are not ashamed." At the request of Kelly's parents, Adriana did not claim the money withdrawn from her account, and the compensation received in the amount of this amount invested in the development of her network of dance studios. The situation with her ex-girlfriend and ex-fiancé was a great life lesson for her, and she was distrustful of the idea of dating that John had expressed. An assistant private detective, it took about 3 years for Adriana to finally believe in the sincerity of his feelings.